Okay, I will call this meeting to order. Welcome to the April 6th, 2021 meeting of the Salem Planning Commission. Shelby, will you please call the roll?
Commissioner Augustine?
Here.
Commissioner Griggs?
Here.
Commissioner Heller?
Here.
Commissioner Kopcho, I don't think has arrived yet. Commissioner Levin?
Here.
Commissioner McKinley?
Here.
Commissioner Pollock?
Here.
Commissioner Schweikart?
Here.
And Commissioner Slater.
Here.
We have quorum.
Thank you, Shelby. I'm seeking a motion to reorder the agenda. Vice President McKinley, do you have a motion?
Madam President, I move that we reorder the agenda to swap 4 and 5. So we do the public hearing before the approval of the minutes.
Great. And do I have a second on that motion?
Second by Levin.
Thank you, Commissioner Levin. So we have a motion and a second. Do we have discussion on the motion? If you raise your hand, because there are a whole bunch of people on this meeting. Seeing no hands raised for discussion on the motion. Shelby, will you please call the roll and signify by saying aye if you're in favor of the motion?
Commissioner Augustine?
Aye.
Commissioner Griggs?
Aye.
Commissioner Heller?
Aye.
Commissioner Kopcho still hasn't joined us. Commissioner Levin?
Aye.
Commissioner McKinley?
Aye.
Commissioner Pollock?
Aye.
Commissioner Schweikart?
Aye.
And Commissioner Slater.
Aye.
Thank you, Shelby. Motion passed. We'll move on to public hearings. Case number 5.1. I'll open the hearing on Class 3 Design Review Conditional Use Permit, Class 3 Site Plan Review, Class 2 Adjustment, case number DRC's SPR ADG 21-02 for the 220 Cottage Street Northeast property. Shelby, would you please read the statement of criteria?
This is a public hearing to consider a Class 3 design review, conditional use permit, Class 3 site plan review, Class 2 adjustment, case number DRCU SPR ADJ 21-02 for a property located at 220 Cottage Street Northeast. The criteria applicable to this application are found in the Salem Revised Code, SRC Chapters 225.005 E2 for Class 3 design review, 240.005 D for conditional use, 220.005 F3 for Class 3 site plan review, 250.005 D2 for Class 2 adjustments. Failure to raise an issue prior to the close of the public hearing with statements or evidence sufficient to afford the Planning Commission and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue precludes appeal to the Land Use Board of Appeals, LUBA, on that issue. A similar failure to raise constitutional issues relating to proposed conditions of approval precludes an action for damages in circuit court. Prior to the conclusion of the hearing, any participant may request an opportunity to present additional evidence or testimony. The Planning Commission will then either continue the public hearing or leave the record open for at least 7 days.
Thank you, Shelby. Olivia, are you ready?
I am. Good evening. My name is Olivia Diaz with the Planning Division. We are here for design review, conditional use permit, site plan review, adjustment case 2102 for 220 Cottage Street Northeast. I'd like to enter the staff report, this presentation, and the additional comments forwarded to the Planning Commission this afternoon. The applicant has proposed an application for a new YMC veteran housing building, which requires a design review in the general retail overlay zone, a conditional use permit for the multifamily development, site plan review, and the applicant has requested several Class 2 adjustments. The subject property is located on the corner of Cottage Street Northeast and Court Street Northeast. It's currently being used as a gravel parking lot for the YMCA. The subject property is zoned CR with a general retail office overlay zone. The properties surrounding the subject property are either commercial, retail, residential high-rise, which is shown in brown to the east, and then public amusement, which is the park for the State Capitol building to the south, and then some more public services shown in purple. 2018 aerial photo shows the gravel parking lot. The YMCA building was obviously still there at that time. Now they're under construction of a new building. I went out and took some current photos of the property. It looks like the property is being used for construction parking for the YMCA across the street. So this is looking north. And then you have looking east, so on the right side of the screen. So this is the proposed site plan for the proposed 34 units for the multifamily development. The proposal has several adjustments requested. So an adjustment to bring the building up to a 0 lot line abutting the street on the south and west property lines, which is consistent with the overlay, but inconsistent with the CR zone. An adjustment to reduce the setbacks for the vehicle use area and the buildings to the north and to the east. A little adjustment down on the south for the vehicle use area abutting the south property line. And then an adjustment for the size of the trash enclosure opening. And then they're proposing to use the existing driveway approach. So that is being reduced to 20 feet from 22 feet. We have elevations of the YMCA building or the Veterans Housing building from Court Street elevation. The applicant has addressed all of the guidelines for the design review as outlined in your staff report. And then Cottage Street elevations. And then we have elevations from the courtyard, so the back where the parking is proposed. Staff did receive public comments from Building and Safety Division and Portland Electric. Those are outlined in your staff report also. We did not receive any comments from surrounding neighborhoods. Can Do Neighborhood Association did submit a letter in support of the proposal. Yesterday afternoon, we received comments from the applicant requesting to modify condition 2 of the application. Staff is not in support of that modification. It would be able to issue the building permit prior to the property lines being reduced. I would have concerns with our building division. It would directly affect the building codes, which is not part of this review. And as planners, we would also be reviewing that development to meet the zoning code and issuing that permit before those lines are gone. It wouldn't be consistent with the staff report. Staff recommends that the Planning Commission approve the application with the recommended conditions of approval in the staff report. And I'm available for any questions. Madam Chair, you're muted.
I cannot wait for Zoom to be over, just for the public record. But using your raise the hand feature, if you let me know if you do have questions of Olivia at this time. As you know, you'll have another opportunity. Let's see any. I have one question with Mr. Sorum's letter, Olivia. He said that there have been times where you have done what he's asking on condition, the modification for the condition. So what's different between what this case and when you have done it in the past?
I don't know that we've ever had a condition where we've said that we would issue, we would wait for the condition to be met until final occupancy of the building. Generally, the conditions are that it's prior to the issuance of a building permit. There are other agreements that we could come to allow the issuance of a building permit with an agreement between the property owners and some legal stuff that would take away some of the liability, but that's outside of the land use process. Okay, but that's a conversation they could have with you. That is a conversation I had with the architect, Doug, when I talked about the condition. Yes. Okay. Commissioner Pollack, you have your hand raised.
Yes. So first of all, I wanted to comment on page 5, section 7, application submittal information. And once again, you didn't mention whether there was when they submitted the application, whether they said there was or there wasn't an HOA. I just want to make sure that we are consistent and that gets in there.
There is not an HOA, and I thought Lisa and I both talked about it, and it was supposed to be in there. So if I missed it, I apologize, Commissioner Pollock.
Okay, so and usually it's either in 7 saying they submitted the application, they indicated no HOA was reported, or you would put it over in the section that talks about that would have been public comments number 4 saying there is an HOA and they were notified and they didn't respond or something like that. So, okay, that's great. Now, I'm a little dense. Maybe it's because we haven't had a meeting in a long time, but can you repeat what you were just talking about on condition 2 for me again? I'm not understand fully what you want and what they're saying isn't necessary.
So condition 2, as staff has proposed, is that the property lines, the underlying property lines are removed in some fashion. They have 2 options to do that, but are removed in some fashion before we issue the building permit, before we give them the ability to start building. The applicant has proposed that they don't have to get rid of the property lines until the building is built and they're ready to put people in it.
Right.
But that would mean that staff is saying that it complies with the code, but as we issue the building permit, which it won't at that point.
Yeah, because I know that personally on a big development behind my house, we had to do a property line adjustment between my house and theirs, and it was required to be done before they could proceed on with the rest of the development. So I don't understand where they're saying that this has been done before. To me, it's a requirement. And but you're saying that either the property line adjustment or they do an adjustment to the standards. Is that it?
An adjustment to the standard, and then for building code purposes, they would need a property boundary verification for the building division.
Right. Yeah. See, and the property line adjustment is a whole bailiwick of stuff, including a final survey. So,
correct.
Like I'm saying, I've had to go through it with the development behind me. So, I understand what it's. That's okay. Now I understand. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Other questions of Olivia at this time? I am not seeing hands raised. So we'll move on to the applicant. Tim, are you speaking as the applicant on this?
There's going to be 2 of us.
And you have 15 minutes. So just so you're cognizant of the time, and it's good to hear your voice, Tim. And see you.
Hello. Thank you so much. It's okay to get going, Shane?
Yep, you go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for giving us this time to just share a few thoughts and perspective on this. This is an exciting time for the YMCA in general here in Salem. We've been here for 128 years. We're the 3rd oldest YMCA on the West Coast. And we're excited about what the next 100 years will be for the YMCA. And that's really looking at 3 main things. The flagship site being rebuilt to really be relevant in addressing our critical social needs for the full age continuum of our community members, also the bed housing that you're looking at tonight, and our program service model. And so we're basically, one of our goals is to bring a broad range of services within easy reach of every child, family, and adults. And in doing that, it's going to be very mutually supportive from a wraparound services, having the YMCA flagship site exactly located next to our veterans housing. We really feel good about when you have that type of density of services, that the impact for the veterans in the housing will be pretty significant in what we can do to help support them to move forward in life. We are on track for an April 2022 ribbon cutting for the new facility. It'll be 51,000 square feet. We will have the occupancy is about 1,600 individuals for that building. We'll be giving free memberships to all the veteran, everyone who's housed in our veteran housing with their families to the Y to make sure we're supportive. And we really feel the future is exciting because as we look at things, the one unique thing about the YMCA is we serve the entire age continuum, starting with early childhood development, youth development, asset building, adult and family strengthening, and aging populations. So we have the ability for all of our veteran residents who will be in the future housing there to have all the supports they need to be successful in life. So I want to end there and just thank you once again for this opportunity. We're excited about the future and appreciate everyone's support. And I'll turn it over to AJ.
Thank you. Welcome, AJ.
So Tim, there wasn't an AJ in the waiting room at all. So I don't know.
I can probably, maybe he's having some trouble. I can give you a few other comments and then see if any of the rest of our team members, if they wanted to discuss. And if he comes in, let me know. But AJ is the chair of our Veterans Housing Board and doing a great job. One of the goals is, as you know, it's 34 units. The key is with providing wraparound supports, not just on-site, but also being accessible to the YMCA across the street. We have a significant amount of partners who have stepped up, who are very interested in seeing this come to fruition, along with making sure the supports are there and a coordinated entry of serving the target population. So there's been a lot of work involved. We're excited about as we move through the process of breaking ground as soon as feasible with the funding of the project and of course meeting all the requirements to move forward. So I just, once again, one of the key things that the Y has been doing housing for the last 90 years. We've had apartments located adjacent to the Y facility. And as the board decided moving forward, housing was, as all of you know, is very important, affordable housing. And so this is basically our commitment to the future of affordable housing with the focus of the population being veterans. So thank you very much. And I'll yield the rest of my time to any of our other team members who may be on this call.
Any other team member would like to? I don't see either AJ or Doug. There will be a rebuttal time towards the end of this. So if they sign on during that time, we can get them to say a few words if you'd like.
I did just resend the access information as well to AJ. So if he's having any issues, hopefully that'll fix it.
Okay. In the meantime, does anybody have a question for Mr. Sinatra using the raise your hand? Commissioner Pollack, followed by Schweikart.
Yes. What are you prepared to talk to us about condition 2?
I'm not. Our other team members would be able to.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Schweikart, followed by Commissioner Heller.
Oh, that was actually going to be, I had the same question. I figured this was
Okay.
the time that Alan could probably speak to condition 2.
Alan, are you on? Mr. Sorum? Commissioner, Alan Sorum is on and he's raised his hand. Would you like to speak to condition 2? Alan?
Yes, please. So it was just intended to raise a question, get some clarity as to process and timing on how to satisfy it. There isn't any real significant concerns from the application team. So I'll just explain a little bit what we were looking for. One, staff correctly noted, anytime you have a development with internal boundary lines, that's a situation that needs to be addressed by the application team. And so in reading the language of the condition of approval, talked about really 2 tools to do that. One was a property line adjustment to consolidate the underlying properties, or an adjustment to be approved to eliminate the setback standards. So we were just hoping to look for a little bit of clarity that what that meant as far as, and I did hear the planner Diaz speak to that as far as the expectation that we would be able to file kind of two applications that would solve the condition of approval. One is a class 2 adjustment, which addresses the land use setback standards, saying that those are would be reduced to 0. And then the second relates to the building code provision, a boundary verification deed. That is helpful to know that that is a tool to address the condition of approval. The reason is if the only way to address that is through a property line adjustment or replat, that adds a significant additional time and cost to a project that needs to be done. And in recognition of the delays that could happen, sometimes the city of Salem has entered into an agreement with the property owner where they would agree that they would allow building permits to be released early, even though you would have a condition like this, in exchange if the property owner would agree to indemnify, defend, hold the city harmless of that. So if the city doesn't feel, and staff feels that they can't modify the condition as they've spoken to, it's, that's okay. We don't need it modified. But if it was available, we wanted to ask and say, would it be possible to not necessarily force us to have to get an agreement, but just recognize that you would not be able to get your certificate of occupancy? Because sometimes, building permits can come in stages. You can get building permits for doing groundwork, the public facilities. You can kind of stage some things. And the thinking was we would be able to complete all of that work in a relatively short time period, particularly if we didn't have to do the property line adjustment, and not slow up any kind of site work or things. So that's all that we were looking for, was just some clarity that the adjustments and the boundary verification would be the right tool to address the condition. And then just asking a question about timing. If it was possible to have a condition, not say prior to the issuance of the building permits, but certificate of occupancy, could we do that? Which would alleviate the need of entering into an agreement. If that's not in the cards, then that's an acceptable answer. We'll take that. But it's always good to ask the question, and that's really just what we were trying to do. So that's all the context, the thinking, the goals there. Does that answer the question?
Commissioner Schweikart, did you have a follow-up? Okay. And Mr. Soren, would you mind stating your name and address for the record? I was remiss, and it's just been a while since we've done a hearing.
Absolutely. My name is Alan Sorum. My office is at 250 Church Street, Southeast Salem, Oregon, zip code 97302, or 01, that is.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's all I had. So
did anybody else have questions of Mr. Sorum while we've got him at the virtual podium? Commissioner Heller, followed by Commissioner Pollack. Commissioner Heller, is your question for Mr. Sorum?
Well, I'm not quite sure. I wanted to who to ask. I wanted to ask the applicant to go over the landscaping plan, because it's not clear to me from the design that I reviewed what it is.
Okay, my guess is that would probably be Mr. Circosta.
Okay.
It won't be me. I know Rob Justice is here. Rob is with home. He might be able to help, but I will defer to someone else on the application team.
Okay. And Commissioner Pollack, before Mr. Sorum steps down, was your question directed to him or to somebody else?
Yes, it was. Yes, it was.
Okay,
about
so could you go ahead and ask that question, and then we'll get back to.
The property line adjustment. So I'm understanding you're saying that you're hoping that maybe they let you break ground and stuff with initial building permits, but by the time the building permit for occupancy was done, you would have completed the property line adjustment. Is that what I'm hearing from you?
So our hope is not to do a property line adjustment, but probably do an administrative adjustment. I think that was intended in the condition. But whatever the tool is, we would, the thinking was, well, building permits, they're all called building permits, even when you're getting permits for grading and site work. The city
Right.
doesn't like to say something's not necessarily a building permit, but the thought was, we don't know exactly when the construction schedule would begin, but we'll try to address this condition as soon as possible. But if we were in a moment in time where we have begun the process to, whether it be consolidate the lots or apply for an administrative adjustment and boundary verification program, nonetheless, whatever tool we were using, if we had started that but not completed it and we were ready to file for the first phase of building permits, the hope was that we would be allowed to have those building permits released, knowing, that we effectively wouldn't be able to have a certificate of occupancy. That's often kind of the gist of the agreement that the city will enter into with someone, where when they are in a situation like this and the city agrees to release building permits early, is there is an outer limit, that you don't get to just not finish up the property line adjustment or whatever the tool is. You do have to complete that job. And so the outer limit is always a certificate of occupancy. So I was hoping to take that idea and instead of having it as a separate agreement with the city, just have it reflected in this condition. But if that's not something that can be supported by staff, that's okay. We'll take the answer. We're not trying to unnecessarily complicate it, but we just wanted some clarity on that point and ask the question.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I know Commissioner Heller has a question for Mr. Justice, but I see Commissioner Levin's hand is raised. Was your hand raised for a question of Mr. Sorum?
Yes, it is.
Okay, well, let's continue on. Hang in there, Commissioner Heller. I have not forgotten you. Commissioner Levin.
Thank you. Based on what we heard staff say, the point that was picked out from the letter that was written was the certificate of occupancy. And as I'm listening to this, I can't help but relate to several deals that I've just transacted that required land use actions for construction to occur or for a parcel to be sold. And to say that one has to come in front of the other is not true. There can be some simultaneous overlap. So Mr. Sorum, do you think that the applicant would find it acceptable if they were able to reach a middle ground with city staff? Like they wouldn't be able to, as an example, pull or request inspection for vertical construction of the property until those land use processes were done, whether it's the adjustment or lot verification. That way you're allowed to do the site work, the dirt pushing, the concrete pouring, etc., and you basically just can't go vertical. That's a very logical break point in the construction process. Would that be an acceptable amount of time?
I think, really, if there's any comfort level in staff, we're going to be happy with it. We don't want to push this over staff's objections. That's not our goal. So we're not asking this planning commission to go against the advice of staff. If they feel that what we're asking for is too much, then we're okay, abiding by that. We'll make it work. If there is something that staff feels that can help us with our goals, that would be greatly appreciated. But we don't want to push the city out of its comfort zone. We appreciate the cooperation that staff has had, and that's so that is. Does that answer your question? I mean, we'd be happy.
I think so. As we go back to city staff, I think this opens up a conversation.
Yeah.
But yeah, but the key point I want to make is we're not asking planning commission to do anything over staff's objections. They have the reasons for that. We respect that. We just wanted some clarity as to fulfilling the condition and ask if there was any room for modification of the condition. If there's not, that's an okay answer too.
Thank you, Mr. Sorum. Any other questions for Mr. Sorum before I let him eat his dinner? I'm not seeing any. Thank you, Mr. Sorum. Mr. Justice, I think Commissioner Heller, you have a question for Mr. Justice. You've got the floor.
Oh, good. Thank you so much. I was interested in, I think it's attachment B on your landscaping plans. I really can't tell what's going on there. Could you just review that for me, please?
Well, and unfortunately, my architect was supposed to be here. I mean, so beyond kind of meeting the standards, of the city, and and especially in regards to the street trees, I'm not in a position to kind of speak kind of beyond that. Other than very happy to kind of take up that conversation, at a later date when I'm more informed and my architect is with me.
I'm here.
Oh,
there he is.
Mr. Justice, could you for the record state your name and address?
I'm sorry. Robert Justice. I work with Home First Development. My address is actually 194 Southwest 12th and Loop, West Lynn.
Okay, you're deferring the conversation to the architect, and
yes, I am.
Would you please, Doug, state your name and address for the record?
My name's Doug Sarcosta. I'm the architect. I live at 14670 Southwest Forest Drive in Beaverton.
Welcome.
Thank you. I'm sorry I'm a little late. I was actually driving from Salem.
Did you hear Commissioner Heller's question?
Yes,
okay.
Yes, I did.
Okay.
The landscape design. I'm sorry I'm not an expert on the landscape design part, but there's there's several parts. There's the parts that related to the stormwater, and then there's some outdoor area for people to relax in and that kind of thing. So there's kind of a two-part for that little courtyard in the back, and then the edges are the buffer requirements that meet the city buffer requirements. There are some existing trees on the very northern side that we're planning on keeping. So the general strategy is pretty simple to meet the code requirements, but also meet stormwater requirements and provide a little bit for outdoor space for the tenants.
Commissioner Heller, did you have a follow-up question?
Oh, yes, I think I'm on. Yes, I do. Can you tell me what trees you're planting and what sizes they are? I can't, my attachment is so small, I can't read it. So would you help me with that, please?
The trees, well, let's see. I'm looking at the landscape plan and they're showing vine maples and flowering cherry.
And what size are those, please?
Well, let's see. The flowering cherry are 2-inch caliper and the vine maple are 8 feet.
Okay.
Follow-up question, Commissioner?
No, thank
You're
you.
good? Okay. Other questions of any of the applicant team at this time? Commissioner Slater.
Thank you. I just have one quick question for the architect. The front of the building is the side facing Court Street. Is that correct?
Well, I guess you could look at it that way. I mean, we tried to make the building face both streets equally. It's just that the longer side is on Court Street, but that's just because that's the long side of the street. But we put the same kind of emphasis on detail on both street side elevations.
Thank you.
Any other questions of the applicant? Seeing no hands raised, I think you guys are off the hook. Moving on, we didn't have anybody sign up from the neighborhood association, although they did give us feedback. They endorse the project, and no others have signed up to testify. So do we have additional questions of staff at this time? Using raise the hand. Commissioner Levin, did you want to pursue anything? Oh, now I see all those hands raised. Commissioner Levin, followed by Schweikart and Pollock.
Thank you. The question for staff would be regarding the question from the applicant about condition 2. Is there an agreement that could be reached that you would be comfortable with that would allow them to move both processes forward simultaneously, the building permit application and whatever the boundary verification, lot line adjustment, consolidation, whatever that is, so long as they can't go as far as actually erecting vertically? Is there something in there that would allow? And the reason I ask is that I feel that it would be more clear for the parties involved if there wasn't a separate agreement outside of what's agreed upon today in the design review. And so if there was an adjustment to that condition versus Olivia and Alan having to go back and meet and then come up with a side agreement and then refer back to what was discussed in the planning commission hearing, if that seems like extra work, that this would be just simply handled if there's an agreement that can be reached now. So Olivia, is there some allotment that you're comfortable with as far as allowing some simultaneous movement going forward on both actions?
I think I'm going to defer that question to Lisa.
Fair enough. Lisa.
Hi, this is Lisa Anderson Ogilvie, Planning Administrator. So the condition as written gives them two different paths to pursue. So they can do property line adjustment, or they can do, zoning adjustments. It's not within the Planning Commission's purview to change the condition in the way the applicant proposed it, because you would be basically taking a decision that's a building official decision and making it on his behalf about when he's going to release building permits. So there, there's two problems with the property lines being there. One is that there's a zoning code setback, right? But there's also a building code setback, and these property lines go right through the building. So for the Planning Commission to say the building official is going to give you building permits even though they don't meet the building code would be overstepping the Planning Commission's authority. So that's why we don't recommend that condition. Mr. Sorm is right. We have done some agreements most recently during the pandemic for certain projects that are waiting for property line adjustments or final plats to be recorded to allow them to start some level of building. Sometimes it's grading, sometimes it's actual building permits after a thorough review by our legal department, planning, public works, and building and safety. And it's really project specific and where they're at and what kind of permit is holding up getting those building permits. The reason the agreement is better than trying to figure out in a condition is one, it can be specific to the project and where they're at. They might be able to do a zoning adjustment and a property boundary verification really easily and before they're ready for building permits. And so that might not be a problem for them. But also those legal agreements require the applicant to take on the liability of building a building that doesn't meet the zoning code and the building code, right? So if something happens and for some reason they can't get that figured out and they have built their entire building and are ready for occupancy without that agreement, I don't think you can imagine the type of pressure that will be on me and the building official to give them occupancy for a building that's completely built that doesn't meet the code, right? Because we've released the permits. That is our what the level of authority the city has. It's what we have to hold on to, right? To make sure that they're doing everything they need to do. And so to try to parse it out through kind of a condition on this land use application would be, I think, premature and kind of complicated. But the agreement option, if all departments agree to it when they ask and when it's relevant, does require them to say that they're not going to sue us over something going wrong at the very end. And that's really important for the city and for our liability. So we have told them that we would consider that agreement if it becomes timely for them. And we're happy to work with them on that. But I think the condition as written gives them the two paths and they can choose either one of those paths. And we're happy to try to expedite their applications, whichever one that they do, you know, within our level of authority that we can to help them get there. So.
Did you have a follow-up, Commissioner Levin?
No, I would just voice my opinion that I disagree that the boundary verification is a fast process. It's not. And a building permit can be issued in 3 weeks and no land use action, even a boundary verification, can be done in that kind of time. So I would disagree with staff's comments, but I think that they've provided some language that I think gives Mr. Sorum some comfort in how they can find an agreement later on in the process when they actually get closer to the building permit application process, which, as Lisa noted, this is a land use hearing. So we're not talking about building or landscaping at this time.
I think Councilor Kapani has a comment.
Good evening, Tom Kapani. I'm the Assistant City Attorney assigned to the Planning Commission. I just wanted to amplify Lisa's comments. The decision about issuing building permits is truly the purview of the building official. The agreements that Mr. Sorum has referenced are really extraordinary circumstances, and they have to be studied quite closely, both for their legal sufficiency and also for the necessity of why exception would be made in this circumstance. And so we would need to understand those things fully before we could commit to entering into an agreement that he's suggesting. You know, we're very early in the process, and so there'll be lots of time to accomplish the necessary parcel process that needs to occur in order to allow building permits to go forward. So, you know, as far as a jurisdictional thing goes, this is really beyond the scope of the Planning Commission.
Thank you, Mr. Kopani. Okay, next I've got Commissioner Schweikart, followed by Pollock, Slater, and then Heller. Just so you know what your batting order is. Commissioner Schweikart, you're up.
I actually lowered my hand because of my questions were answered.
Wow, that's awesome.
Thank you.
Commissioner Pollock?
Yes, this is for our attorney and Lisa, I guess, either one. So the condition 2 speaks to 2 options. You know, one of the things that this Planning Commission has done is actually had to clean up a bunch of messes that after the city's got into agreements kind of this kind, and it's caused problems in the past. So I'm just wondering, why would you actually okay, so my question to you is the adjustment and the property line adjustment and the setbacks adjustment, would those processes take the same amount of time?
Well, the zoning adjustment will go out for notice. So it would go out to the surrounding property owners. There would be an opportunity for comment and opportunity for appeal. So generally that's a 45-day process or so from the time that they would submit a complete application. A property line adjustment doesn't go out for notice. So the staff processing of it is pretty quick, but it requires them to hire a surveyor and do the work up front. And then it also requires a city surveyor review on the back end. And either one of those processes can end up taking a lot of time. They can kind of dig into things and find just issues with the history of the property and the deeds and the lines that were unknown that can make that process be really long and difficult. A property boundary verification, so that's different. It doesn't remove the property lines. Instead, it's a deed modification that kind of ties the properties together under ownership. And that would satisfy the building code, not the zoning code, but the building code. And that's a fairly quick process because it's just a new legal description that's written. I don't believe the property's surveyed. And then the city reviews it, but we don't send that out for notice either. So I think people prefer generally a zoning adjustment process and the property boundary verification, because although the timeline for notice can be a little bit longer, it doesn't have the ability generally to get into problems like a property line adjustment can. I think anybody that's done a property line adjustment in Salem, if they've done more than one, have probably had one that's gone really wrong and gotten more difficult than they thought it was going to be. They just move a simple property line. And so that's why it could take kind of an unknown amount of time. And I think that's probably what Mr. Sorm and Mr. Commissioner Levin are alluding to with their experiences.
Oh,
Did you have a follow-up, Commissioner Pollack?
no, that's it. Thanks.
Yeah, Commissioner Slater.
Sorry. Two questions, I guess. One for Lisa. So I think Commissioner Levin made a comment that landscape is outside kind of our purview in this particular hearing. Maybe I misunderstood that. Lisa, is that right? Or is there a different time that we should be addressing those issues?
No, their landscaping plan is part of this application with their site plan review. And I think Olivia had put it on the screen when Commissioner Heller was asking the questions. And and here it goes again for your review. So this is their landscaping plan. And a reminder that they are asking for reduced setbacks to some of their property lines and are showing more landscaping kind of to make up for those reduced setbacks. So that is part of what the Planning Commission is reviewing tonight.
Thank you. Sometimes I get a little confused on this. My other question is, do we have any standards? Does the city have any standards related to designating or designing for a front street as opposed to a side street? And the reason I ask this is because I think of Court Street as kind of the main street. It faces the Capitol. We tend to run east and west here. And I'm wondering if we have any standards that require some design that emphasizes the front of the street as opposed to a side of a street in some of our more public spaces like downtown.
Yeah, that's a really good question. We do in some of our overlay zones. For example, if you think of Broadway Street, that mixed use zoning there requires the buildings to be oriented towards Broadway and not the side streets. The zoning in this area, although it has some design standards, which is what the Planning Commission's reviewing tonight, it doesn't have any standards about emphasizing a certain street.
Okay, thank you. And similarly, there's no design requirement that then the front street would be continuously occupied. And I ask that because it looks like there's part of the building and then there's a gap and then there's the kind of the recycling garbage waste area on Court Street. But that is consistent with our current guidelines.
Right.
Okay. Thank you.
And I believe this, I don't know if you mean the gap is a pedestrian sidewalk to access the building.
Mm-hmm.
I think maybe if Olivia could go back to the elevations on her slides. Right, so that gap would be, it's hard, maybe kind of hard to see here where the little person is. That would be a walkway into the, if you're going to access the back of the building or the parking lot.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Any other questions of staff? Not seeing any hands raised. Okay, also the applicant does have time for any rebuttal if you would like to rebut anything that was mentioned during staff questioning a few minutes ago. You have 5 minutes if you'd like to take that.
I like to, this is Rob Justice, owner's rep. I think, we feel really good about our relationship and working with the city on this project. And, what we've heard is, real openness to some collaboration and some time to be able for us to kind of talk through and really determine kind of what our path is. So, I really what I wanted to say is just thank you. to that openness. And I appreciate the thoughtful conversations. At the end of the day, what we're trying to do here is to provide a home, for low-income veterans. So, and I always like to bring that up because we rarely do caught up in the details. But, I think that this, in regards to the why, we feel like staff has really opened up some options for us. And so, we're looking forward to that continued dialogue to figure out the best path.
Great. Thank you. Any questions of Mr. Justice from the commissioners? Not seeing any hands raised. Great. So without further ado, I will close this hearing, and I'm looking to Vice President McKinley for a motion, please.
Madam President, I move that we adopt the staff report for item 5.1.
Okay, do I have a
second?
Was that Schweikart?
Schweikart.
Thank you. Okay, discussion on the motion. Please raise your hand. Commissioner Pollack, followed by Commissioner Schweikart.
I want to say, first of all, I want to say that staff did a really great job. And Olivia, other than the HOA I mentioned, I just want to say you did a great job. And I'm really glad to hear that staff and the applicant work together for a positive end. And I think this is a great project, and especially for the veterans. But given that, in the past 6 months or more, we have seen both state and city come to us to fix problematic issues regarding zoning when they try to go forward with stuff, because they had this patchwork stuff that was absolutely wrong, and they're trying to make things right. And we've at least since I've been on my 8 years, we've fixed a lot of mess ups of agreements. And I won't even talk about a bridge that never got built because of some, let's push it back, and it never got built. So I think when it comes to these agreements, I'm kind of leery. I say, if the state and the city can abide by it, I'm sorry, but even a nonprofit has to. So my thought is that I think that the fact that the planning department, the staff gave 2 options for condition 2, I think it's a great thing, and I don't want to mess with it. I've been through a property line adjustment. It is something, but it makes things clean. The only thing, it may not only bring up stuff, it also gets your finance company involved. In the end, your financial people are going to have to, if you have a deed of trust out there, they're going to get involved as well. So I do understand the complications of property line adjustments. But again, at the end run, if they give them the adjustment to the setbacks, I just wonder if if that property boundary, agreement is something that, would suffice, would make it such a legal situation, other than making it a really clean lines adjustment. So what I'm saying is that I'm okay with the adjustment, condition 2. I would prefer a property line adjustment, but at least they gave our nonprofit another option. So I think that was a great thing staff did for them. So I agree with the way condition 2 is as it's written.
Thank you, Commissioner Pollack. Commissioner Schweikart.
Hi, yes. Really, my main comment that I wanted to make was just to support this project and to support both the YMCA and also Home First Development. I think that as somebody who is intimately familiar with trying to build affordable housing specifically for special needs populations, I know how hard it can be to clear these hurdles. And I think that it's, very commendable that that this project is moving forward, and especially in this financing climate. So, I know how hard it can be to get competitive financing for affordable deals. So just wanted to say that, tremendously supportive of the work that you're doing, and very much look forward to seeing it built and hopefully, if you have a groundbreaking ceremony that is COVID appropriate, we can all go to it. So very excited.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Commissioner Schweikart.
Thank you.
Yeah, I agree with both commissioners. I'm in full support of the project, and we are a very fortunate community to have that partnership with the Y providing a service that's so needed. And please, Tim Sinatra, give AJ our best. We missed him, but you did a fabulous job covering for him. Any other question or comments for the discussion on the motion that's under consideration? I don't see any other hands raised. Shelby, will you please call the roll and signify by saying aye if you're in favor or nay if you're not in favor of the motion?
Commissioner Augustine,
Aye.
Commissioner Griggs,
Aye.
Commissioner Heller,
Aye.
Commissioner Kopcho,
Aye.
Commissioner Levin,
Aye.
Commissioner McKinley,
Aye.
Commissioner Pollock,
Aye.
Commissioner Schweikart,
Aye.
and Commissioner Slater.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion passed unanimously. I would like to make a note for the record that under item number 3, public comment, we didn't have anybody signed up. I kind of glazed right over that, but just so you know, we did not have anybody signed up for that part of our agenda. I'm going to open a hearing now on item 5.2, class 3 design review, class 3 site plan review, South Waterfront mixed use zone development phasing plan modification, class 2 adjustment, and class 2 driveway approach, case number DR SPR SWMU DPP ADJ DAP 21-01 for 295 Commercial Street. Shelby, would you please read the statement of criteria?
This is a public hearing to consider a Class 3 design review, Class 3 site plan review, South Waterfront mixed-use zone development phasing plan modification, Class 2 adjustment, Class 2 driveway approach permit, case number DR SPR SWMU DPP ADJ DAP 21-01 for a property located at 295 Commercial Street Southeast. The criteria applicable to this application are found in the Salem Revised Code, SRC, Chapters 225.005, E2 for Class 3 Design Review, 220.005, F3 for Class 3 Site Plan Review, 531.020D for South Waterfront Mixed Use Zone Development Phasing Plan Modification, 250.005D2 for Class 2 Adjustments, and 804.025D for Driveway Approach Permit. Failure to raise an issue prior to the close of the public hearing with statements or evidence sufficient to afford the Planning Commission and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue precludes appeal to the Land Use Board of Appeals, LUBA, on that issue. A similar failure to raise constitutional issues relating to proposed conditions of approval precludes an action for damages in circuit court. Prior to the conclusion of the hearing, any participant may request an opportunity to present additional evidence or testimony. The Planning Commission will then either continue the public hearing or leave the record open for at least 7 days.
Thank you, Shelby. Bryce, we're ready for you.
All right. Good evening, President Griggs, members of the commission, and thank you, Shelby. I know these consolidated cases can be a challenge when you're trying to read them out. You know, there's long case numbers. But good evening again, Bryce Bishop with the City of Salem Planning Division. I'm here tonight to present the staff report for the proposed consolidated case before you. And it is for a 72-bed post-acute care facility with ground floor commercial retail tenant space located at the corner of Commercial and Front Street for property located at 295 Commercial Street Southeast, which is the southern half of the north block of the former Boise Cascade site. So this is an exciting project because I've been involved with the establishment of the zone originally, and now we've seen the South Block apartments come to fruition, the parkfront development on the north end of the Boise site, and then this is kind of the last piece on the north side of Pringle Creek to be developed. So slowly but surely, the old Boise site is being redeveloped, and it's an exciting time to see that over my course of my career here. So the application before you tonight includes 5 components. There's a design review component, class 3 design review component for review of the development for conformance with the design review guidelines of the South Waterfront mixed-use zone. Also a site plan review component, which reviews the application for compliance with all of the applicable requirements of the city's Unified Development Code. A modification to the previously approved South Waterfront mixed-use zone development phasing plan. And the phasing plan is needed, when a development is not meeting its required mix of uses, per an individual development site, but is rather, looking at the broader, development of the zone in its entirety to meet its required mix of uses. And so since this is a new proposal for this portion of the site, they're modifying the previously approved phasing plan for it with new square footages to demonstrate that they still meet the minimum mix of uses required. A class 2 adjustment, and with that adjustment, there's a request to deviate from 2 standards. One, to eliminate the minimum required 5-foot parking and vehicle use area setback adjacent to the north property line that it shares with the parkfront development to the north, and then a reduction to the minimum driveway spacing, from the existing driveway that is being modified on the southeast corner of the site. It's spacing to to Front Street, and then to reduce the required spacing, minimum spacing from that driveway to the nearest driveway to the south that goes into the parking garage of the South Block apartments. And then finally, a driveway approach permit. So in terms of application processing, it was submitted on August 5th, deemed complete on March 3rd. Mail notice was sent out on the 16th, posted on the property on the 26th, and the state mandated decision date is July 1st. So in terms of the location of the property, shown in orange here with the asterisk, it is located kind of to the southwest of the downtown, but certainly, in the downtown area. It is, next to the railroad tracks, and then to the west, further to the west, there is Riverfront Park. To the south, there is a Southwalk Apartments, which is across Pringle Creek, which this area of the creek has changed. Obviously, there are no longer any buildings there, and I have a slide to kind of show you what that looks like. Now it's also near City Hall, which is to the southeast of the property, and it's across from the convention center, to the southwest, across the intersection of Commercial and Front Street. Front Street is a parkway in the city's transportation system plan, and Commercial Street is a major arterial. So in terms of the zoning of the property, it's zoned South Waterfront mixed use, and the zoning was applied several years ago when Boise vacated the site and sold the property, and the zone was established to encourage the appropriate development of the site in a fashion that's consistent with the downtown, supports the park, and realizes the mixed use development that we in the city wanted to see in this area. And at that time, we included additional property that's beyond what is just being shown here. It also included 2 parcels across, the railroad tracks to the northwest that are now zone CB, and those were called the park parcels. But subsequent to the establishment of the zone, those properties have been sold to the city, and now the city has requested, had requested to change the zoning of those properties to CB to allow for the expansion of the park. And then also, so you do see the southern end of the park now being improved, parking lot expanded for the carousel, and then also the rotary covered stage and and pavilion that's being under construction right now. So those are no longer part of the site. So we're just left with the properties to the east of the railroad tracks on the north and south side of Pringle Creek, and then also the slough parcel that's located south of the creek on the west side of the railroad tracks. But again, to the northeast, it's predominantly central business district, the core of the downtown, with some various overlays in the Salem Historic District and a portion of that area. And then it's across the street from public zoning, which is occupied by the Civic Center and Fire Station 1. So in terms of the site conditions in itself, the property is 1.14 acres in size, created through a previous partition plat. So it is a legal lot. The property abuts the north side of Pringle Creek. And so when you look at this, this is a recent aerial photo, obviously, that shows the restoration work that the city has conducted, to reestablish the bed and banks of Pringle Creek. So the former slabs of the old structures that used to be there are no longer there. They've been removed. So you now have a fully daylit creek with a reestablished stream bed and newly established banks that go up. And then there is a flat plateau area at the top of the bank where the city has created an area for the proposed future pedestrian path that will, result in the extension of the existing path, which goes on the north side of the creek, which terminates under Commercial Street. That will be extended in the future as a city project, and it will eventually go underneath railroad tracks and connect to the established pedestrian paths in Riverfront Park. And there's also the potential that there will be an under crossing of Commercial Street to go from the path on the south side of Pringle Creek to then a plank or gangway or whatever alleyway to go, hung from the bridge to go to the north side. So, it'll result in this, linchpin of pedestrian paths being completed, which will really expand pedestrian access in this area. In terms of natural features on the site, there's no mapped landside hazards or wetlands. There are some trees on the property, but they don't, rise to the level of the size of being 10 inches of RDBH to be protected under the city's tree preservation ordinance. So here's some different views, a couple different views of the property, kind of bird's eye view. So this is, looking to the northwest. So you see the South Block apartments to the left, Commercial Street, in the middle. The former structure that used to be over the creek, now that is gone. So it's fully daylit. The subject property is shown in the wide outlined area. You have the Parkfront office development to the north, Riverfront Park, at the top of the image. And now that has been, changed, as of late. Sorry, I don't have a recent picture, but there is the new, parking lot and driveway expansion for the carousel area and the berm, and then the rotary covered stage and amphitheater is under construction. And then the conference center to the northeast. Here's just another view looking to the southeast, which shows, again, South Block apartments, the site here. And then you can see Salem Hospital off to the southeast, the Meridian further to the south. And so you kind of get a feel for, this area, obviously. Multi-story buildings, closer to the downtown, urban character. Those are all the things that this overlay zone is trying to encourage, on this property. And then here's some ground level views. Thank you, Google and Street View, because I did not go out to take these pictures, but here's a view at the intersection of Commercial and Front Street, looking to the southwest. The site, currently it's flat, nothing, there ready to be developed. Here's a view, looking, to the south from Front Street, looking due south. And so you see the South Block apartments. The proposed new building will, because of it's kind of a long and skinny building, it will occupy, the majority of what you see, in the image here at the bottom, because the building is up next to Commercial Street, and then it goes for quite some, ways to the west. So that's kind of the area where the new building will be. And then finally, two last views. One which shows, somewhat the creek and the new bank and the trail, and then the riprap, for bank stabilization, the existing retaining wall. And the subject property is up at the top of the retaining wall here. You have park front and the shared parking area with the two developments, or the shared access, vehicle circulation area that the two developments share. And then finally, a view looking more directly west, at the intersection of Commercial and Front Street. And this is kind of where the retail space within the building will be located, with the plaza, in front of the building. So as I mentioned earlier, because the development's in the South Waterfront mixed use zone, and because this development, even though it has a group living component in the terms of post-acute rehab facility, it's not considered a residential use. And so therefore the post-acute rehab use and the non-residential retail use are all considered, non-residential. So the development site in and of itself wouldn't meet the required minimum of 15%, household living, non-household living mix. So they are amending the development phasing plan to look at the development, this in the South Waterfront mixed use zone as a whole, which takes into account, all the residential that occurred with the South Block apartments, the office development that occurred at the north end of the site. And when you look at all those numbers, and as identified in the staff report and in the phasing plan that's an attachment to the staff report, out of the total 307,838 square feet of building area that will be present with this project being completed. It has a mix of 68.8% of household living and 31.2% of non-household living. So it exceeds the minimum 15% mix in conformance with the South Waterfront mixed use zone requirements. So the development, is again a 72-bed post-acute rehabilitation facility that is kind of shown in the darker area of the footprint here of the site plan, the darker orange, and then the retail space is on the east end of the building in the lighter orange area. So the post-acute care facility portion of the building is 4 stories in height, 72 beds again, and it's about 55,293 square feet. The commercial tenant space is ground floor only tenant space, and that totals approximately 3,936 square feet. As previously mentioned, it's the marquee site and the parkfront site are on the north side of the creek, and they share access. And this was established in the previous development approval for both parkfront and the previous development approval for this site. Some planning commissioners may remember that a previous version of the post-acute care facility was reviewed and approved by the planning commission. At that time, it was a 52-bed post-acute care facility. Plans have changed since then. The previous approval expired, and so that's why they're back in for this new proposal, and with a new bed count and change configuration for retail space and building layout on the site. But again, because of limited access to Commercial Street, because of the spacing, the proposed development will include an existing entrance only driveway at the existing driveway space on Commercial Street that's being widened to be a minimum of to be 20 feet, not a minimum. It will be widened to be 20 feet in order to meet fire department access, because the fire department needs to to be able to have aerial access around the entirety of the building because of its height. So the driveway here is going to stay. It will be used for one-way access and for the fire department, and also obviously a lot of the parking for the development on the property. And then there's also a shared stormwater management system. The site does have its own stormwater area where it'll treat on the site in kind of the southwest corner, but some of the stormwater does run off and is designed to go to the large stormwater facility on the parkfront property. So there is shared stormwater and shared access. So entry only on commercial, and then the access onto Front Street is a two-way driveway, both in ingress and egress. So in terms of the design review application, this zone has quite a robust set of design review requirements that cover everything from site design to building design. In terms of the requirements, it deals with breaking up the building mass, the vertical mass of the building, requiring transparency, on the ground floor and the upper floor facades of the building. Requiring that building entries are inviting to pedestrians and promote a sense of interaction and transition between the public realm on the sidewalk and the private realm within the building. There's requirements for screening mechanical equipment and a ground level and rooftop, mechanical and service equipment. There are design review requirements that deal with the buildings creating a well-defined, edge to the public realm, especially along the street and along Pringle Creek. Also requiring all buildings to be easily accessible from the sidewalks and public open spaces on the site, requiring parking lots to be located behind or generally to the side, behind or to the side of buildings. So the idea is so there's not parking areas that are located between the building and the street. So that promotes, pedestrian friendly appearance and a better appearance for the development of the site by having the presence of cars minimized as much as possible. Weather protection is required along all ground floor facades next to sidewalks. And then the last one is the requirement to have at certain identified corner or gateway areas that are identified in the zone, that buildings are designed in such a manner that they really call out the area as a special area of the site, and the building is emphasized in a way that the corners of the buildings are emphasized to really, establish as a visual landmark on the environment, and then to, establish a, architectural prominence at those corner gateway locations. And so staff, the findings addressing conformance with the design review requirements are included on pages 8 to 19 of the staff report. We feel that the design meets all of the requirements, except there's a couple areas where we recommended conditions that I'll talk about further as I proceed here. So in terms of vertical mass of the building, the design, really does meet these design requirements in terms of breaking up the vertical mass. And the design guideline talks about breaking up the mass of the building in a manner that's consistent with the city's, downtown downtown built environment, essentially. And one way that is done is by establishing, a base, middle, and a top. And so, as you can see by the renderings and elevations here, there are different materials and an increased height of the building, that's included at the base. There's, pronounced horizontal banding to break up the ground floor base of the building from the upper and top portions of the building. And then there's a distinct middle portion of the building that uses different, materials and colors to establish the middle. And finally, the building has a cornice element that, caps the building and establishes the top. So it is the design as shown here does, break up the building sufficiently and is consistent with the, the design that's, the design approach that you see in the city's downtown buildings typically. And then here's just some other elevations. This is, looking along the creek here to the north, so the south facade of the building. And again, you see, windows on the ground floor, the distinction between the base and the upper floors through the use of materials and color, and then that, continuous, parapet or cornice that's included, at the roof level. The next requirement deals with building transparency, and this, really promotes, transparent ground floors in order to, create a sense of interaction, between what's going on in the building to what's going on the sidewalk. Nobody wants to walk by a blank facade. It's terrible and uninviting and not interesting. So these design requirements are required to establish minimum requirements for, ground floor transparency to really, make the ground floor environment along the sidewalk next to the street inviting and interesting. As can be seen in the proposed designs, the portions of the building that are up next to the street and, even portions that go back further to the west away from the street include, lots of, transparent ground floor windows that are tall, that are very indicative of, kind of the downtown aesthetic. So it meets the ground floor window transparency requirement. And then on the upper floors, the design review guidelines require that when vertical windows or windows be distributed throughout, the entire upper floor facades to ensure that there is, site safety and surveillance by having, eyes, in all areas of the site, which this does. And the windows also help to break up the overall, mass of the building as well. In terms of building entries like, the ground floor transparency requirements are intended to be transparent and or recessed or include, canopies or awnings so that they are inviting to pedestrians. So as you can see here, all the buildings are transparent. There's no opaque doors. There's canopies over the entries for weather protection. And so this is you're, walking into that building from the sidewalk, either from the public plaza area or from along the commercial street facade, or on the north side of the building from the paved area that goes from Front Street to the north entry into the retail building. That entry is transparent, so you see what's going on when you walk into the building. And then the other entry for the post-acute care facility portion of the building, it's kind of tucked away to the south or to the west side of the building, and it is accessed by a pedestrian path, direct connection to the sidewalk. And then that entry also does include, transparent windows and a canopy. So all the entries in the proposed development meet, the transparency and the weather protection requirement so that they're inviting and provide that transition between the public realm and the private realm. In terms of mechanical and service equipment, as can be seen on this slide, the proposed development does include a trash enclosure area at the west end of the site, as well as a generator enclosure. The guideline requires these to be, the view of these to be minimized from the public right of way. And so their location on the west end of the site and their enclosure by 8-foot, tall decorative CMU block walls will ensure that those areas are not visible, from the site. And depending on the vantage point, they're also obscured from the building, so it meets the requirements for screening and minimizing the view of these areas, these mechanical and equipment areas from the public right of way. In terms of defined edges to the public realm, that's achieved through this design by having buildings that are up to the street with setbacks that are minimized. When you have a 4-story building and that's up to the street and with minimized setbacks, it's very clear that, you know, you have a distinct, you know, wall or edge to the public realm or the public right of way. So the height of the building and the mass of the building and its relationship to the public areas does define, you know, the public area as required by this design review requirement. In terms of parking, the proposed, you know, parking areas on the site are set back, you know, from the street generally, or where there are areas where they are close, they are buffered, you know, from the site with landscaping and a screening wall. So the existing park front development to the north has a large stormwater area, and then there is a screening wall that is located in this area to buffer the view of cars from the street. The majority of the cars on this site are set back, you know, behind the building, you know, so they're not between the building and the street. And there are some, you know, that are located to the side of the building, but, you know, there is a large, you know, setback, you know, landscape setback, you know, between these spaces and the public right of way. And then there is, the spaces are buffered from the north property or the south property line with a landscaped setback. And there is a condition that is included in the design review conditions that looks at the greenleaf manzanita that is proposed, you know, in this area. And we're looking at recommending that the Planning Commission have the applicants, you know, select a different, you know, site obscuring, buffering evergreen hedge, you know, that's between 3 to 6 feet to replace the manzanita because of the future path to the south that will go along the north side of Pringle Creek. The manzanita has berries, and it could, you know, create a maintenance, you know, issue with berries dropping on that path. So we're recommending that a different, you know, similar in height, you know, evergreen shrub, you know, be provided to buffer, you know, the south, you know, driveway and parking lot from the south property line. In terms of weather protection, you know, there's sidewalks that go around the building. All those sidewalks are, you know, covered by canopies. So the design clearly meets that requirement. And then finally, this brings us to the gateway, you know, corner emphasis design guidelines of the refinement or the zone. And these are getting at, you know, trying to mark, you know, through architectural and site design features, you know, the prominent areas, prominent visual areas of the site. And so this image on the left is from the map that's included in the South Waterfront mixed use zone. And so this site, it includes 2 gateway areas, one on the north side of the creek, at the intersection of the creek and Commercial. And then the biggest bubble or the biggest circle identified, which meaning kind of the most significant and most important, being at the intersection of Front Street and Commercial Street. The Front Street and Commercial Street node, you know, was important because of its location. You know, Commercial and Front Street is a very busy intersection. If you're coming, you know, on Commercial Street, you know, from the north going to the south, you can look down the street and you will see this property at this location. You know, so the intent of having a prominent building with prominent architectural features at this location is critically important to the zone. And then ways that the zone identifies to meet the establishment of the prominence of this location are to include like prominent architectural elements such as increased height, you know, at the corner. Here you kind of see a different window treatment that is provided in this image on the left. Not only is there an increased height to mark the prominent corner location, but there's also a different pattern of glazing, a more dense, you know, approach to glazing pattern than what you see on the left and right, and also at the first, you know, two and a half floors of the building, there's a different window pattern. So that all, and then also signature signage on the canopy. So that is a way to prominently mark the corner. The image on the middle is from the zone, and it shows an area where you have, again, you know, some detailing, you know, at the corner at the top of the building to mark it as prominent, and then also a public plaza space, you know, at the ground floor. And then the one image on the right shows another way through utilizing signature signage, you know, at that corner. So of the design review guidelines that apply, you know, staff, as you can see in the staff report, we're recommending that a condition, you know, to add some articulation to the building at the corner. Again, it's, you know, at the corner here, Commercial and Front Street, that is kind of the most prominent corner that's identified in the zone. And the proposed design does include, you know, the plaza, you know, on the bottom, to kind of mark the articulation and kind of the prominence of the ground floor of the building. But when we compare it to the previous, design that was approved in 2016, it really doesn't have the upper, prominence to really mark it as the corner. It does have a different color, but it's kind of a void rather than like an increase of height or something else to identify it as kind of prominent. And therefore, staff's opinion, that corner somewhat gets lost, especially if you would like to be driving down Commercial Street, or Front Street and going south. Your eye would, not necessarily, rest, because when you're far away, you're likely going to be able to see the upper part of the building first and not focus on what's going on the ground floor. So by having something of a taller height at the corner or more pronounced roof line projection, that would really help to anchor, the corner more in consistency with this design guideline, as staff is indicating in the staff report and recommending to be conditioned. So just a little context. So the current proposed design is shown on the upper left. The 2016 approved design, it was tick the box on almost every one of the elements. So it had a projecting roof line. It was, it had a, increased height appearance, a tower appearance. You had a different, window, pattern and treatment that was, here that would differ, the window pattern and treatment to the left and the right of this more solid, bank of windows. You had canopy, with the name on it, and you had signature signage. So, and the plaza. So when we looked at the 2016 design, it just seems like this was really meeting the intent of the guideline to establish a prominent corner of this location. The proposed design, as I said, still does have the plaza, but it's missing, articulation at the top. So based on what we'd approved in 2016, staff was just proposing a modest compromise, to pull some of that detailing that was included in the previous design, to this design, and that would be in the form of like a projecting roof. And here's just a quick example that I did of what, a projecting roof, could do to help, anchor that corner, give it more architectural prominence. As opposed to not having anything at the top, it kind of bleeds away, and in your eye, your eye doesn't have any place to rest or to stop, and I think that's kind of the one thing about the corner treatments. We're looking for visually prominent, architectural design that really, draws the eye and you focus on it. And so we think that without having, upper roof projection that was, done in the previous design, it's kind of a challenge, and you don't have necessarily the same feel of a prominent corner. So the condition that we've included in the staff report, essentially allows the design to be, would require the design to be modified to provide, that articulation. It doesn't specify which way, but, one way could be a simple projecting roof line, which is consistent with what was approved in the past. So in terms of the site plan review, it was reviewed, the application has been reviewed for compliance with the South Waterfront mixed use zone, all the parking requirements and the parking chapter, landscaping requirements in chapter 807, and all the other applicable standards of the code. There are some conditions of approval that are recommended for the design review to meet the standards. They're pretty minor. And with those conditions, the proposed development will meet all the applicable standards of the code, and the findings for that are included in pages 19 to 30 of the staff report. And here's the, kind of a close-up of the site, plan again. So you have the trash enclosure on the west, you have a loading area to the northwest of the building, you have all the parking provided on the site. The minimum requirement is 40 spaces. They're providing 54 spaces, which is above the minimum, but not exceeding the maximum. You have the skilled nurse or the post-acute care facility in dark orange, and then you have the retail space, which occupies the entire frontage of the building at the corner of Front Street and Commercial Street, with three different entries to the retail space, and then an entry to the to the post-acute care to the west of the building. Bike parking, there was a requirement that there be 6 spaces provided. There are 6 spaces provided, 8 spaces are being provided, so they exceed the minimum. And in terms of loading, 1 space is required, and they provided that 1 space. There is a Class 2 adjustment with this application. As previously mentioned, the Class 2 adjustment eliminates the 5-foot required landscape setback along the north property line. And this is consistent with the adjustment that was approved back in 2016 for the park front development, which allowed their 5-foot setback on the north side of the property line to be eliminated. Having a 5-foot setback on the south side of the property line between the property line and the parking stalls creates a situation where you just the site doesn't feasibly work. So the setback is needed in order to accommodate the shared access and circulation that the two sites have together. And then also the adjustment to reduce the minimum spacing of the existing driveway, which is proposed to be widened a bit from Front Street and the nearest driveway to the south. The staff, we've reviewed it, and Public Works has advised as well, and we feel that it meets the requirements for spacing, and the adjustment is for setback is warranted, and the findings are included in pages 32 to 35 of the staff report. And finally, the property is located within the Can-Do Neighborhood Association. The applicant contacted the Neighborhood Association as required under the code on August 13th. We haven't received any comments from the Neighborhood Association leading up to this evening. The property is also not within a homeowners association. It's, former industrial land. There's aren't any, individuals that own, land in this area. There are apartments, but no ownership, so no HOA concerns. And we did receive a comment from ODOT. They indicated no objections. They're fine with the existing, driveway onto Front Street, as that was approved in the prior renditions of this development and the park front office development that was approved. And we did receive some public comments. Those public comments raised some, issues regarding the importance of landscaping on the property. And so as provided in the staff report, the landscaping, in combination of the buffer yards on the perimeter, the landscaping within the parking lot area with the trees and the ground cover all exceed the landscaping requirements of the code. There was a question about the allowable height of structures on the property. One of the residents of the Southwalk Apartments had been told by the listing agent that apparently there would be no structures greater than 2 stories on the property. And that, certainly not the case here. Staff has no knowledge of any kind of private agreement that would have been entered into amongst the seller and the buyer to limit the height of structures on the property. So it could be very well just a misunderstanding. But, a 2-story property would be very counterintuitive to, the standards of the South Waterfront mixed-use zone, which were, in a lot of respects modeled after the CB zone, which is, allowing, tall buildings, next to the riverfront, to make efficient use of space and to really create that urban, environment that we're looking for in the downtown. There's also some concerns raised for pedestrian safety, for people walking on the sidewalk along Front Street as you go north, and the concern of people with the additional traffic exiting the driveway from Front Street and not necessarily looking for pedestrians that may be coming from the south, and then more actively focused on looking for their opening in the flow of traffic from the north. And then there's also a similar concern about the intersection of Commercial and Front Street, for pedestrian access. And so there weren't any, requirements, in terms of, offsite transportation improvements, for the proposal, because it doesn't meet the level of trips that are required to do a traffic study. The intersection of Commercial and Front Street is a signalized intersection with, traffic or pedestrian traffic walk and don't walk signals. So really, it, requirement to provide additional flashing lights and warnings for pedestrians, is not justified and can't be, required, with this development. And then the comment also questioned the amount of parking, for the development, thinking that it was kind of low. But as previously indicated, the minimum requirement for the post-acute care facility and the commercial tenant space is a cumulative of 40, and they're providing 54. So they're above the minimum and they're not above the maximum of 70. So with that, I would conclude my presentation and recommend the Planning Commission adopt the facts and findings of the report and approve subject to the conditions identified. Thank you.
Thank you, Bryce. Questions of staff at this time? You could raise your hand. That was a great presentation, Bryce. Commissioner Slater.
Thank you. That was a very good presentation. Thank you. I have a couple questions. One or two just for my information in terms of various policy issues. Regarding the Front Street entrance exit, the driveway on Front Street, if someone were visually impaired, how would they be able to protect themselves from a less than cautious driver?
Well, it would be the same, it would, it would just be like a driveway crossing, anywhere in the city, like on Lancaster or Commercial Street, where you have a driveway entering. There, we don't have a standard that I'm aware of that would, require, there has to be ADA, approaches at the, for sidewalks and ramps, but in terms of, a person with a disability, I'm not sure if there would be any, special protection, offered, in terms of, how this development being different from any other development. There's driveways throughout, the city, and yeah, so I maybe Lisa, do you want to weigh in on that?
No, sorry, I don't have anything except to say that yes, it's no different from any.
It was more a general question on that issue than the specific plan, but I took the opportunity.
Okay.
Do you have a follow-up, Commissioner Slater?
I have a couple different questions, if I may, but I can wait till the end of the queue.
No, you go right ahead.
Okay. On the issue of the manzanita, were you implementing a current city policy relating to berries?
Yeah, there is a requirement to have, when you have trees along, public right of ways, to be of a nature that they don't have berries to create a maintenance problem. So, we're kind of reflecting that policy because there will be a public, pedestrian path to the south.
And how close to that hedge line?
Well, that is a good question. It will be a little ways over. There's an easement that's 20 feet wide. Let me get to the slide that kind of shows the current site conditions, which you can kind of see if I.
Right, and I confess I grabbed onto that kind of minor obscure issue because I suspect the landscape architect picked that one rather carefully as a native plant that provides bird and actually caterpillar habitat, butterfly habitat, which is kind of interesting to me. And I know the city is moving away a little bit from this no evergreen, no berry policy. So I was wondering in this particular situation, given it's a short hedge and a small berry, if this might actually be necessary.
Well, so if you look at the slide here, the green line is kind of where, where you can kind of see there's a different color. The path would kind of just be in this general area. So there is a bit of a setback because there's rock, riprap that goes up from the plateau, and then it goes up to the retaining wall. So whether or not like a 6-foot manzanita is going to drop the berries, and let me see, I'm going to go to a different one here where you can kind of. So if you look at this photo here, so you have the bank or the bed of the creek, you go up to the banks, and then it plateaus off here. And then there's all the rock, riprap, which is another, horizontal distance of run before you get to the retaining wall. So I guess it, quite frankly, it would be, for the height of 6 feet, you'd have to have probably a pretty stiff wind, blowing from the north to blow maybe those berries onto the, because
I'm not going to vote no because of a manzanita hedge, but I did.
But so there is some horizontal separation there.
And my final question, if I may, is if you can go back to like one of the elevations where we can see a cross section of the design. To what extent do the city's design standards drive some of the features we see, such as the fact that there are 16 different materials being used on the facade, and there are kind of multiple bandings and pop-out structures on the face of the building. Is that a reflection of our design standards or more the client and architects?
Well, it's a combination of both. So the base, middle, and top, differentiation. Quite frankly, it could be simpler here. They've incorporated a lot of different materials and design approaches that go beyond probably what at a minimum, one can make a justification for meeting the design guideline. For instance, you have, the different shades of orange banding that separate the, the window panes. We do require the kind of I like to say the basic fundamentals of good design in terms of site layout and architectural design, in terms of breaking up the building, base metal top, setting parking behind the building or to the side of the building. We do require, in this overlay zone that you can either use different materials or color, to break up the overall vertical mass of the building, which is kind of unique in a lot of respects. We don't necessarily get into the materials being a way to do that. But yeah, so it's, we do have the basic fundamentals, but I think that the design here is taking it further, to their credit to really break up the appearance of the building.
Thank you. I just wanted to understand to what extent our own policies were driving this outcome versus the client's taste. Thank you. That was it for me.
Thank you, Commissioner Slater. Commissioner Levin, and for the record, please note, Shelby, that Vice President McKinley left for his other job.
It is on the record.
Thank you. Commissioner Levin, you have the floor.
Bryce, going back to the beginning of your presentation, you mentioned that there were no landslide hazards and therefore an assessment didn't have to be done. There's a pretty steep grade change to the south of the development parcel, and it's a pretty tall building and there's a lot of mass there. So when was engineering done that then negates the need for verifying a landslide hazard today?
Well, our landslide hazard requirements are based solely on, the development activity that is occurring on the site and the presence of mapped slide susceptibility, either earthquake or water induced, based on the Dogami maps. And so when we look at, the Dogami maps, and we have this composite map that looks at the earthquake and water induced slide susceptibility, and then that together with contours and topography, there are no areas, of the site that are mapped, with that hazard. So under the pure, application of Chapter, 810 landslide hazards, there isn't a requirement to require one because there aren't any mapped slide hazards present. Now, this type of facility, I'm assuming, based on the nature being post-acute care and the type of clients that will be in the building, I'm assuming, and this would be a question for the architect team, that they're probably going to be doing a seismic study, or to in association with the design of the building to ensure that it's going to be stable and secure. But from the pure code respect of can we require a landslide hazard, a geological assessment or a geotechnical report? We can't, because there isn't any justification to based on the map.
Perfect. Okay. And we all can reasonably hope that if the developer's not using the engineer that did Marion County's building, then they won't have any issues with it collapsing or falling on people.
Well, that was a failure in design of the slabs and puncture shear and not enough in watering. Yeah, that was a whole separate series of issues that
all came down to the engineer signing off on stuff that was totally inappropriate. So my other question is going to the manzanita plantings, and I was kind of curious about that. I guess we have quite a few city approved street trees that do drop leaves that create a lot of landscape maintenance and cleanup. Our cherry blossom is a classic one. It is an ugly Tim Burton looking tree 9 months out of the year, and then it turns green, and then it turns pink for about 2 weeks. And then my building, which is just south of this picture, is completely covered in pink cherry blossom leaves that we have to pay to clean up. So how much is the manzanita bush an approved street tree?
Well, it's not a street tree here. This is just landscaping on the site. It's next to a path.
So then if it's landscaping on the site, I guess I gotta ask, does the city have the ability to put a condition that has to be changed?
Well, the reason that we put that on there is because of its proximity to the future path and trying to, minimize, an issue in the future, potential, if stuff is being, blown down onto the path for the city to have to maintain. We're trying to look out for the city's interest in that respect, to avoid that, and so if the applicants are agreeable to it, it seems like the approach was a win-win situation.
Okay, one more follow-up.
Yes.
Is the cherry blossom tree still an approved city street tree?
I do not have the approved street tree list in front of me right now. I could not tell you.
Okay, it would be nice if we could get an answer to that. The reason that I bring that up is that the maintenance of that tree is so high that if that is an approved street tree, that's really contradicting kind of the theory behind requiring something other or requesting something other than the manzanita bush. So maybe if we could get an answer on that later, if the cherry blossom's still a required street tree, that'd make me feel warm and fuzzy. But that concludes my questions.
Okay, yeah, I can surely follow up with Commissioner Levine.
Thank you, Commissioner Levin. Any other questions for staff at this time? I'm seeing no hands raised. Commissioner Schweikart.
Hi. I just had a very quick question, which is I was intrigued by the definitions of what was considered housing versus not housing. I guess the household living versus not household living, and I assume that the post-acute rehabilitation facility is not household living because it is, and I just want to make sure I'm clear here. Is this facility one that there will be dwelling units that are temporary dwelling units, or kind of how is the rehabilitation aspect? Like, is that something where people go and they live for a period of time? I'm just trying to understand a little bit.
Yeah, the distinction between post-acute or household living versus non-household living falls, it stems from chapter 400, which is our use classification chapter. So that chapter organizes all the uses that are allowed in the different zones into groupings. And so, there's household living, which includes, one family, two family, three family, four family, and multifamily, which are, family individuals or families living together in a dwelling unit as their permanent place of abode. And then there is group living, which are like, dormitories, nursing facilities, room and board facilities, those fall under group living. And so, when we structured the code back when we established, the zone years ago, we wanted to have, the mixture of, independent, people living in independent dwelling units, be there like condos or rental units, independent. And then there's, everything else, which is, other than household living, which group living happens to be part of.
So I'm just trying to make sure I understand though, when we say post-acute rehabilitation facility, is that a service that is done in is that simply
they have beds, patient beds, in the building, and they share facilities. And, it can be short-term. And then I believe, the applicant, similar here, you could speak to some of the operational requirements, but I think it's kind of a mixture of, recuperation from, like an injury or, being discharged from the hospital. And, you have to, live in an area for a period of time where you're getting supervision because there's not.
Right. So there's some sort of tenancy aspect to the definition of household living.
Yeah.
Like term of tenancy.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay, so that's
whether or not the facilities are shared or not, independent units versus like shared living facilities.
Got it. Okay, I'd never seen household living in any of our previous applications before. I'd never seen that term.
Yeah, it's just one of the. If you look at chapter 400, yes, it's a broader category. There's household living, group living, and then so it's just one of those broader ways to organize the more specific uses.
Got it. So because the post-acute rehabilitation facility the dwelling there is in a congregate setting and it doesn't have a permanent tenancy. That's what kicks it out of the household living designation.
Yeah, that's a fair assessment. Yes.
Thank you. That's it.
Got it. Thank you. Any other questions of staff at this time? Not seeing any hands raised. We'll move to the applicant. Would the applicant like to address the commission? And you have 15 minutes, and please state your name and address for the record, because I cannot pronounce your last name.
Hi there. My name is Matthew Stoffergan with CB2 Architects. Address is 500 Liberty Street Southeast, Suite 100, Salem, Oregon 97301. I have Gretchen here and Dylan as well, so I may bring them in to answer some questions. We'll be short and sweet and then kind of turn it over to answer questions of the commissioners. Bryce did a great job of recapping the project submittal. The only thing we really want to address, I think, up front is condition 2 is the corner elements. We disagree a little bit with that condition being proposed. Mainly because it's asking for us to do 2 code requirements when we've met the required 1. So that actual code section states that corner treatments shall do one of the following. The first is which is a prominent architectural element such as the increased height. The second option is a signature signage, and the third option is a public gathering space, which we have provided. The code does not state to provide all 3 of these or even 2 of these. It says to provide 1 of them. In our review of the project as it sits in the neighborhood, basically next to South Block, which has a colored variety of palette or a variety of colors and palettes on the facades. We sit next to Parkfront, which has a very vertical, rhythmic design, and it sits kind of kitty corner from the convention center, which has got a bunch of angular columns. There's a lot of movement, a lot of activity with the buildings in the area. So compared to our previous submittal, which had a lot of materials, we felt this was getting busy both on the building and the adjacent neighborhoods. So our response to that was using a bright color, a simplified color that you could see from Trade Street, from Commercial Street, for most intersections. And then it actually kind of helps simplify the project while still maintaining that corner kind of public plaza. So in our review of the code, we're meeting the code requirement as designed. So we would ask that condition 2 be removed from the staff report or the staff recommendation. And other than that, I think we're pretty much on board with everything Bryce has put together. Dylan or Gretchen, do you have any comments before we turn it over for commissioner questions?
Yeah, the only comment I'd say is that Bryce put together a very nice. Oh, I'm sorry. This is Dylan Chavez. I'm with CB2 Architects. Address is 500 Liberty Street, Suite 100, Salem, Oregon, 97301.
Thanks,
Bryce did a fantastic job presenting our building. You don't often get to see somebody else present something that you've been working on for so long. So it was good to see it done very well. So I reiterate Matt's comments about the condition 2 as being the interesting one. I'd also like to point out that I'm not sure who had raised it, but the catching that a manzanilla is a caterpillar habitat was a very nice touch. I've known about that, but I hadn't heard anybody else bring that up in the past in a long time.
That was Commissioner Slater, for the record. So are we opening up for questions? Are you ready for questions, Dylan?
Yes.
Okay. Questions from the commissioners for the applicants? Raising hands. Commissioner Pollack. You're muted, Commissioner Pollack.
Okay, so I looked at attachment J, which was the former one architectural rendering that we previously approved. And I want to say, Bryce, I was on the 2016 when it was approved. And I see there was a distinct corner element. And I do agree that the on the staff report, it says 1 or more of these features. But when we look at the current architectural thing, which I actually love better than the one, I love attachment E and the rent, what you knew Architect better than the old one in number in attachment J. But when we look at what Bryce put on there with the extending roof line, I think it actually brings it out better and is a more attractive feature. I mean, what would it take from you guys to agree to that?
Well, I think that it's a good fair point, and I've also was on the first design in 2016, so we probably met at some point back then as well. I think what's different about 2016 version, which is what it's hard to compare two different designs like that, right? Because the 2016 version of this building was a shorter building. It was a 3-story building. With the increased height that we're adding to that space in terms of the verticality of the 4th floor and the parapets that are in that area, that as a pedestrian and in that space, you're increasing so much more of the height that it's making that overhang become a little bit problematic in terms of how you break apart the building. The other thing is that the design of 2016, which isn't shown in the whole thing, that element was consistent throughout the rest of the design for the building, whereas what was indicated in the staff report was an element that was added to that one portion of the building, which is incongruous with the rest of the building space itself. So it kind of pulls away from the overall design that's brought together in that space. And so I think what you end up with is more of a tack-on kind of feeling inside of that. When you look at the building as a whole, both from not just from that perspective, but also from the view you get as you drive down Front Street, the view you're going to get from the new amphitheater on the park side, and also as you're coming down that way from the South Block apartments. So while I can't say that you couldn't find a way to make something like that work, I think that we are meeting the intent of what we're trying to do in that space by meeting the guidelines that are presented to us with a design that is consistent, so it works from all vantage points of which you'll see the building.
Okay, now hold. Can I ask another
follow-up? Yeah.
Bryce, can you please pull up the rendering, which kind of shows the buildings on the other side of the creek?
On the south side of the creek?
Right.
Okay, let me find that.
Okay, that's a good one. The current proposed design. See how you can see on that particular one on the other side that has an overhang, but this goes to what, it's a couple of things. One, I like the way that the design with the projecting roof looks, as it's almost kind of in keeping with the building behind it. But then I also have to agree with the architecture. That building also has an overhang on that corner and the back corner, which shows it's a more of like a consistent architectural design. So I can go either way. I just think that building with the overhang makes it more. It seems to make it more flow better with the building behind it. But then I do understand what Mr. Chavez is saying, that it kind of makes it look odd if it's just standalone. So.
Okay. Did you have a follow-up question, or is that more?
No, I just want to make sure that, would it be architecturally impossible to put that roof line on there?
I will never say anything in architecture is impossible.
Okay.
But I do think that it would be, I think that the real concern is what it starts to tread on is the differentiation between division of scopes and things like that in terms of dictating a design in a space like this. And I think one of the hard parts is that we're looking at a very small corner of the building. And I want to make sure that we have to understand that this building is all the way around, from each side. And so if we add elements, we also have to find ways to tie those elements in on the other sides of the building where something like that may not be as appropriate, where we've worked through a lot of those kind of ideas. And, it was noted that there's a lot of materials and movement inside of those things, and all those elements are working together to make the whole design feasible. And I think, Matt, I might have cut you off. It's hard to tell in Zoom sometimes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, just to add to Dylan's point, it is, we want to avoid being a tack on. We want this to be a holistic design, not only on our site, but with the entire neighborhood and the buildings that are next to us. We don't want every building next to each other to have the exact same architectural feature. We also don't want every item on the building to be of significant importance, because then nothing is important. So Bryce made the comment of a void versus a prominence. Sometimes the void can be prominent. Sometimes a canopy can be prominent. So we are, as architects, are stewards of good design. We are professionally trained to be stewards for design. So our 2016 project, as Dylan mentioned, was 3 stories. It was a slightly different program. It fit differently on the site than how this project fit. And so as we studied this and analyzed this, we proposed what we feel is the best solution to this site for this building in its context. It's just, and which is why we're not proposing a canopy element, because we haven't found that to work quite the best way for the holistic part of this site. So can something be explored? Yes, but I don't think that would be advantageous.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
Yep.
Next up is Commissioner Heller, followed by Slater, and then Levin. Commissioner Heller, you're on mute.
Thank you. I'm looking at this. I'm on the same issue of the corner. I'm looking at this, and the buildings seem to flow well, but I think that it looks much more finished with the overhang, and I think it also sort of pulls together with the apartments. So I really support the staff's condition too. I think it is a really lovely addition. So that's all I have to say. And
thank you. Commissioner Slater, followed by Levin.
Thank you. And maybe I'm just speaking for myself here, but my guess is that we're talking about the design so much because it is in such an important location in the city. So typically we don't go on, I think, quite as much about design elements, particularly parapets and things. But Matt, I thought your comment about dialing down some of the features a little bit in context to what had been developed around it was a very important point. I understand, this has become, there's a lot of shapes and angles and patterns in that particular area. Do you want to talk again, or is there something more that you would like to say about how this design then fits in with all the kind of dynamic structures that's going on around it?
Yeah, thanks for pointing that out. So, yeah, when we were looking at this, I don't know, Bryce, if you're controlling the screen there, if you can go to one of the site plans, pull that up. I think we have one that's maybe a little bit larger than that, or maybe if it's further back, I think, hopefully we do.
Matt, are you looking for like the entire park front and so?
Yeah.
Okay. Let me just get there.
If you have the entire park front, that would be helpful.
You close your eyes. If you have motion sickness, be careful.
I'm closing.
Yeah, actually that one.
Yeah, I think I passed it. Hold on a second. Let's see. There we go. Is that okay?
Yep. Yep. So what you're looking at here is, that corner is basically visible from 3 different streets. So as you come down Front Street, you see it. As you come down Commercial Street, you see it. As you come over from Trade Street, you see it. And so directly south of us is the South Block Apartments, which our firm did. And the corner element that's visible on the apartments has a large canopy on it. But that corner element is what we kind of jokingly call a piano key. It's got this gridded pattern of different colors, different squares and rectangles. It's got a lot of movement. And then we use a lot of colors down the verticality of that structure. That South Block was such a large kind of redevelopment that we kind of created little villages. Each little vertical element had a kind of color band. It made it feel smaller, even though it was a really large facility. That's actually a good photo that Bryce had. Yep. So you're starting to see on South Block, we've got kind of on the south corner there, a bright red box. On the north east corner, it's that kind of piano key color. And then we've got all these kind of vertical pieces kind of in between the two. So we've got some movement and a certain kind of context here. And then if you go just north of the proposed project to the park front, It has a lot of verticality as well. It's got dark bands of dark bands of metal siding where the windows are, and then it's offset by vertical brick. So it's got this, again, very rhythmic vertical movement that's right next to our building. And then kitty corner is the convention center, and it's got, if you guys can recall, this 2-story volume out front. It's got a lot of angular columns. So it's got a lot of movement in different ways. So at this intersection, if you're coming from any direction, you can look in any direction and see a variety of vertical elements to your left. You can see some vertical elements to your right. You see this kind of angular columns on one side. So when we're looking at this building as a whole, our building now that's kind of in the middle of all these, we felt that the appropriate response was to simplify that corner because there's so much movement happening that if we simplify and bolden up that corner, take off some of the tack-ons and have it be a simple element, it actually will stand out more in contrast compared to all the other elements that are around it to have a bunch of movement. So the other, let's see, Bryce, if you can go to our rendering that's showing our north facade. Maybe back one.
Yep.
That works. So on the bottom elevation here, where the little flower logo is, the right hand. Actually, I can annotate on this, right? Okay. I'm looking at this guy right here. So that orange piece is in relation to this corner element here, and so this one here, as you're driving south on Commercial, this is straight in your vantage point. So this bold, simple orange color actually stands out more prominently than all the other stuff that has a base, middle, top, all these extra features and movement. So the same thing's happening with this corner here. As you come around these vantage points, you're seeing all these other colors, all these other movements. This simplified, bold color actually is more prominent than adding extra features to the corner, if that makes sense. So, Commissioner Slater, did I answer your question or clarify?
Yes, thank you. It sounds like, in part, the building reveals itself as you continue on your drive or your walk.
Correct.
Thank you.
Hey, Commissioner Levin.
I don't have a question for the applicant. I have more comment in regards to this conversation about the corner and the code requirements. And from the conversation we've had and what's been presented, and based on what the Planning Commission is charged with and what is within our purview, in my opinion, the applicant has met the requirement of the code, and the city is overreaching and asking for this roof element to be added. And I would say, in follow-up to that if everybody on the Planning Commission likes it, then why don't you all pony up for the expense of what that will cost? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Levin. Any other questions for the applicants at this time? And I am trying to find my raised hands. I don't see anybody raising their hands. So thank you, and you'll have a chance to rebut if there are comments that you want to rebut. We don't have anybody signed up from the Neighborhood Association, and we don't have any other people signed up for testimony in general. So questions of staff? Commissioner Slater.
Thank you. So I have a great deal of sympathy for Commissioner Levin's point about what the commission has kind of a purview to do and what cost that might add on the applicant. I wonder, though, in light of the fact that we have some discretion because there are some variances requested, doesn't that give us the ability to add additional requirements on as compensation? And maybe this is for Lisa or Tom.
Well, the compensation has to be kind of related to what what the degree of the deviation from the standard. So, you wouldn't reduce the spacing for a driveway and say, well, we're going to use that as a justification to require the roof, or like the reduction of the 5-foot setback, for the parking area along the north property line. There isn't really a nexus between, that reduction and an architectural treatment. So that, the exaction or the additional measure to more fully meet the standard that's being adjusted has to really get at equally or better meeting the underlying intent of that specific standard. So if you're going to reduce like a 5-foot landscape strip, for a parking area next to north property line, you might justify that there's more landscaping, provided elsewhere on the site, to buffer, the parking from the street or something like that. So there has to be that kind of relationship between, what the standard is requiring, and if they're asking for a deviation to the standard, whatever mitigation measures that the Planning Commission might impose have to be related to, to take the project and help it better meet that underlying intent of what they're asking to deviate from.
Sure.
But Commissioner Slater, just to clarify, we're not asking for this condition related to any adjustments.
Yeah.
They're asking for the design to be approved under the guidelines. So they're not meeting the standards. They're asking for the guidelines. And so on our review, the design doesn't meet one of the guidelines, which is why Bryce is recommending this condition. So it is within your purview, because you will be making an affirmative vote if you approve it, that it does meet the design guidelines.
And if I could ask one follow-up question to that.
Yes, you may.
I don't have the statute in front of me, but the applicant quoted the statute as saying 1 of 3. Is that a correct interpretation of the statute? Or
it's one or more. It's one or more of the following. So it's not just one. It is one or more. They could do one, but the reason staff looked at this is because the plaza that they had proposed is smaller than the original. There was a lot of loss of articulation from the previous design, and we felt that the shrinking in size of the plaza space between the building and the street, and the loss of the other articulation at the corner, was taking it further away that with the intended vision, because this is a prominent corner. This is the corner of corners on this site, because of its busy intersection. And there is the pedestrian experience, but there's also the experience as you're walking south on Commercial Street, or from there and you're looking to the site. And when you are walking south on Commercial Street today and you look and you see the roof treatment on the South Block apartments, that element on the corner, the raised height and the projecting roof line, it is a natural visual, visual catch to the eye. It catches your eye, it makes it prominent. And so with the shrinking of the plaza size and the loss of the other elements, we felt that it was getting further away from the intent of the guideline to really mark that prominent, important corner, with some architectural detailing. And the fact that the previous design included it, staff didn't anticipate it would result in a huge cost to the project. It's just a simple projecting roof. So, and we thought it was a modest request to better meet the intent of the guideline and what the intent of that design.
The language of the statute is 1 or more, not
Yes.
1 and more.
No, one or more of the following.
Okay, thank you.
Bryce, I had a question. You mentioned that the plaza area is smaller. On the new design, it looks more prominent. It looks, because it doesn't have that little retaining wall or whatever that wall is on the 2016 design.
Mm-hmm.
What is the difference in square footage between the two? Because I think this new design appears larger.
Mm-hmm.
Well, unfortunately, I do not have, I can pull up I can find the site plan, because it's, it really becomes clear when you look at the site plan, drawings from above, so I could stop sharing and I could go look for, that previous design, and I could, see if I could, bring that, forward and for you guys to look at. But in terms of the square footage of the space, there is the other design, it had more of an area, where the ground floor tenant space, came out, there was more of an open space area in there than the current, let me go back. That's a good one. So there, the essentially, the plaza areas here, but the other design, the plaza area, kind of extended into this area as well. Kind of would have been on both sides of that portion of the building, and it would have been a larger area.
I guess my point is because that little the wall on the 2016 design is no longer in the design.
Mm-hmm.
To me, and I'm not an architect and I don't play one on TV, but it appears to be more prominent, giving that corner a prominent feature than the 2016. That's just more of a comment, but I was curious about the size difference. Do we have other questions of staff? This is your last. Commissioner Pollock, there you are, sorry.
Okay. So I just want to point out to Commissioner Slater that on page 16 of the staff report, section D, corner treatment, it does have the actual statute in bold. And it does, and like you have, and this goes for me on this particular thing. In the past, I have talked about the balancings of burdens. Burdens of like statewide goals, the burdens of the code and things such as that. And always we start out with the code itself. And I would say it says one or more of the following techniques. One or more meaning A, B, or CC. So the thing is that it has number CC, the plaza, and then it has A. And to tell you the truth, if you look at their design, absent the canopy, it instead of the Bryce, my question is this: could you go back where it shows the old design and then the new design?
Yes.
Okay, so the old design has a separate tenant building that's a 1-story, but what this does, what the new design, as far as my visually is concerned, is it actually accentuates the corner. Instead of this just one little building sticking out that wasn't actually on the corner, the new design actually accentuates the corner with a middle building being a different color, and then and to me it broadens out the tenants. Instead of this one side building that seems like a second thought, it extends the tenants. It makes the plaza area look larger, and to me it looks more like, again, what we want in a mixed use, where people could see the inside and the activities inside and outside, and it's just a flowing. It flows better. And so when we talk about and then going back to my administrative law stuff, which dictates what we're supposed to do when we follow the code, is that the balance of burden. I just don't see the canopy as being that more significant, because if you look at AA, they do have an increase in mass where you have 3 little protrusions on that corner that makes that corner more prominent than it would have been like almost to the design before. I think the design before on 2016 needed that overhang, because it was just a building sticking over the side that wasn't exactly in the corner, whereas the new design actually kind of makes it actually makes a corner more rounded. And so I and as far as balancing the burden and I don't really, at first, I like the canopy and it's going on with it kind of feeds with the other, but after listening to the architects and talking about the other building and the piano sort of thing, and then the convention center and going on, I'm going to have to agree with, and my question to you is that how, I mean, if the code says one or more, they have already done CC, and I'm thinking the way they designed this, so they have the 3 protrusions and the different colors on the middle building, I think they actually have done AA as well. And so, I don't. My question to you is that do you think that I mean, if you're going to make them do all 3, then make them put a sign there. So I think that they've met their burden. I mean, they met what the code says. And again, this is one or more. And not necessarily all of it. So do you have anything to say to that?
Yeah, I see what you're saying about, the building at the corner where you have the right side and the left side, and now in the middle you have this, projecting mass. But when you look at the examples in the code, it does tend to talk about something that is taller, and this gets back to kind of like here, this is like a turret, it goes above, and things by nature, when we look at things, if something is taller or larger, it tends to be more prominent and emphasized, as opposed to like the void. This is kind of like you take the corner of the building that would otherwise be up to the street, and then you're like, removing a portion of it, and it's setting back a little bit, and it's a void, without a pronounced top, and in looking at the overall mass, and it doesn't seem that it is as pronounced as you would have in the examples in the overlay zone, or the zone rather, that talks about some things that are increased mass. And yes, it is an increased mass. There is a mass there where there's two white portions of the building where they intersect at a 90 degree, and there is a mass there, but that is the corner, and it's not taller, and yeah, but I see what you're saying, how one could make an argument that potentially AA is met, but again, it doesn't, it doesn't have anything to call it, out from the other portions, to the left and the right of it, other than, I guess, the color.
Okay. Thank you, Bryce.
Any other questions of staff? Okay, would the applicant like to rebut anything that they have heard? You have 5 minutes if you choose to do that. Or you can just say.
I appreciate all the comments. Those were all great.
Could you state your name for the record, because she doesn't have a video when she does there. If you could state your name.
All right, this is Matthew Stoffergan with CB2 Architects.
Thank you.
So yeah, I think our final recap is just, back to the corner condition, and the code again states one or more, and we believe more than one. Prominence doesn't mean extra height. That's subjective. So we're trained design professionals. The planning commissioners are, all have their own opinions as well, but we want to disassociate one idea, one thing being canopy or height as being prominent. That's not the definition of prominence. So we're meeting what the code says. We are, in our experience, being good stewards of design. So we're proposing that condition be removed. So that's our final comments.
Okay.
And hope you guys vote that way. So thanks.
Thank you for your time. Last opportunity to question or grill Bryce or Lisa. Don't want to leave Lisa out. And I am not seeing any hands raised. So I will close the hearing, and I'm looking to Commissioner Schweikart for a motion.
Yes, I will make a motion that the commission adopts the application 5.2 with the staff conditions, except condition 2 in the class 3 design review.
Second by Levin.
What was the second? Was that Levin?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Levin seconded it. Let's open it up for discussion. Raising your hand, Commissioner Pollack.
First, I want to say to all the parties involved, both the applicant and especially Bryce. Bryce, you did an excellent presentation and definitely an excellent argument on the situation of condition 2, and it's not one that we haven't talked about before, because you and I have talked about this, before the hearing. Before we get into that, I just want to point out, thank you for mentioning the HOA. However, it wasn't in the written portion, which should have been, which I think it's page 6. Section 6, paragraph 4. If you could remember next time to put that in the written part, I'd be really happy. I'm going to give my spiel again on as far as condition 2. It's the code says one or more. The building, and it says building located at the corners, gateway shall incorporate architectural or site planning design elements, visually emphasizing the corner of the building. I do believe that three sort of block sections actually emphasize the corner more than the prior design. And with the canopies on the bottom and the plaza and the windows that sort of have the living sort of like an activity out and in, is just accentuates the corner to where I believe anybody coming through that, their eye will be addressed to that, not necessarily to the top of the building, but to the center, and the distinct different colors that'll be their center that they're looking at. So although I appreciate Bryce's argument and everything, I'm going to have to agree with the motion as proposed to eliminate condition, although it does look nice with condition too. But when I heard the architectural argument about the whole area, I'm going to have to agree with the motion as proposed, not asking that, eliminating a condition too.
Thank you, Commissioner Pollak. Commissioner Slater, you have your hand raised.
Thank you. I'm happy to vote for the amendment or the motion as offered. I would be happier if Commissioner Schweikart would also would accept a friendly amendment to remove condition 1 about that poor manzanita. And then I did want to say one more thing about the design, and that is I'm worried that perhaps staff is interpreting the guidelines in a way that kind of more is better. The more articulation we have, the more features that a design meets, the better it is. And I think that gives us kind of these over-designed, overwrought buildings. Sometimes, less is more. And I think this is an example of one of them. Thank you.
Thank you. Discussion, other discussion items? Seeing no hands raised. Commissioner Levin.
I just want to follow up on Commissioner Slater's comments. I really appreciate him referencing condition 1. I too have the same feeling about the manzanita bush. So there was a request for a friendly amendment, and I would appreciate it, Madam President, if we would hear out that friendly amendment. Friendly amendment that was suggested by Commissioner Slater.
Commissioner Schweikart, would you accept that friendly amendment?
I will accept that friendly amendment.
And so, Levin, since you seconded it, I'm assuming that you're good with that.
I most certainly am.
Okay, so Shelby, do you have
I'm sorry, sorry to butt in. I think we need an actual motion to amend and an actual vote on that. I'm sorry, your rules don't actually cover friendly amendments, although they seem very friendly. I think someone needs to make that motion. Needs to vote on it.
I'm Slater, are you making that motion to amend?
Oh gosh, well now I'm scared to make motions, so.
Well, if you don't do it, Levin will do it.
If someone wants to direct me on the best way to make this substitute motion, would I move the staff amendment with the removal of conditions 1 and 2?
So your motion is to.
You could say I move to remove condition 1, and then if that's voted on and approved, that will be incorporated into the original motion. Yeah.
So we have a motion to delete condition 1.
Yes, that is what I move.
By Slater, we need a second.
Second by Levin.
Second by Levin. Discussion on the motion. Shall we call was that a discussion? Commissioner Pollak?
Yeah. If you looked at I just wanted to point out to Commissioner Levin, if you looked at the landscaping plan, there's a cherry tree on the site. So I just want to point that out. And that's all I want to say. That's all I want to say.
Thank you, Commissioner Pollak.
And thank you to Shelby for forwarding the street tree list. That cherry blossoms are still an approved street tree. There's actually 2 versions that are a recommended City of Salem street tree.
Okay, so back to our motion that's on the table right now to eliminate condition 1. We had it moved by Slater, seconded by Levin. Do we have any other discussion items before I call for the vote? Shelby, will you call the roll and signify by saying aye if you're in favor, nay if you're opposed?
Commissioner Augustine,
Aye.
Commissioner Griggs,
Aye.
Commissioner Heller,
No.
Commissioner Kopcho,
Aye.
Commissioner Levin,
Aye.
Commissioner McKinley.
Yes,
Oh,
aye.
I'm sorry. Just going down my list.
Yep.
Commissioner Pollock
Aye.
and Commissioner Schweikart
Aye.
and Commissioner Slater.
Aye.
Motion passed. So we'll go back to the original motion was to accept staff recommendation with the elimination of condition 2, which was made by Schweikart and seconded by Levin. Discussion on the item, on the motion? Seeing absolutely, Commissioner Schweikart.
Just because I know that Shelby has to write all this up. Elimination of condition 2 in the class 3 design review, because the way that it's written, there are multiple condition 2s. So
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other discussion on that motion? I'm seeing none. So Shelby, would you please call the roll, signify by saying aye if you favor of the motion, nay if you are not.
Commissioner Augustine,
Aye.
Commissioner Griggs,
Aye.
Commissioner Heller,
No.
Commissioner Kopcho,
Aye.
Commissioner Levin,
Aye.
Commissioner Pollock,
Aye.
Commissioner Schweikart,
aye.
and Commissioner Slater.
Aye.
And McKinley is absent.
Thank you. So we will.
Oh, Tom has his hand raised, so I wonder if we need to.
Does Mr. Kapani?
I just wanted to make sure it was clear that the condition 1 has the same qualifier as condition 2. Is that correct?
Both from the design review?
Yes,
Yes.
that's correct.
All right. Thank you. That's all.
You bet. Okay, so we have finished with that. We'll move back to item 4, which we did have that reorder of the agenda. Commissioner Levin, do you have a motion on approval of the minutes?
I do. I have one adjustment that I wish to make. The minutes as printed read a bit differently than the motion that was presented by Commissioner Slater. And as I chewed over this and I asked staff for counsel on this and opinion, and there was an inclusion of a word that caused me some concern in the final drafting of this. And I understand that for those that aren't involved or weren't privy, Shelby had to reach out to President Griggs and Commissioner Slater to get clarification on kind of what the summary of what that motion should read as. And when that summary was written, it includes the word zoning with the, and sorry, I'm trying to grab that right now so I can read it exactly. But it was quote unquote, bold policies and zoning that address climate change, unquote. The inclusion of the word zoning caused me some internal conflict that I have not been able to get over. And so I made note to city staff that I would be changing my vote on that to a nay based on the inclusion of that word zoning in that motion. And it's more a technicality and semantics. The motion still passes by a 7-2 vote, even if I change my vote. But I wasn't able to sleep over it, so I felt like I needed to make that comment on the record. So with that change of my vote on that particular motion to a nay vote, I would.
We haven't, yeah, Commissioner Levin, we haven't even gotten a second yet on that. We haven't had a vote yet on the minutes. So if you would move approval of the minutes, and then I'll get a second, and then we'll have a discussion, and then you'll have that opportunity to vote. Does that make sense?
Well, I thought I was supposed to make the notation of my requested vote change as a part of my, did I get that wrong,
Okay.
Lisa?
Oh, I think you're right. I think you're absolutely right. Mr. Kapani wants to weigh in. Probably we need some guidance.
Yes, I had understood that the vote was going to be a no on the agenda. You can't actually change your vote. Your vote has been made. If your understanding of what you were voting for is different than what was produced, you can always ask for a motion for reconsideration, but your vote has occurred and it's there. So, but your objection to the agenda can be expressed by a no vote to adopting the agenda, if that's what you choose to do.
Adopting the minutes.
The minutes, excuse me.
Yeah.
Right.
So is that clear, Levin? So we would make the motion, we get a second, and you're on the record of declaring why you were uncomfortable with the way it was recorded. I think unless you want to reconsider that.
I need to ask Lisa then, is that what you were intending when you wrote that email to me about my two options? Because what I understood was that I was to note my vote change.
No, so what I was saying is you can vote no on the minutes. So once somebody makes a motion, doesn't have to be you, to adopt the minutes. And then you can, as you've explained, you don't think the minutes are accurate. So you can vote no on the minutes tonight. If you don't think that's enough, you could vote, put forward a motion to reconsider the R. Salem recommendation. And if you get a second on that and that motion passes, then the commission could come up with a different recommendation for city council.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. So we will make a motion to approve the draft minutes of the, holy cow.
February 9th. February 9th.
February 9th Planning Commission hearing.
Thank you, Commissioner Levin. Do I have a second?
I second.
Who is that?
Pollock.
Pollock, thank you. Commissioner Pollock is our second. I'll open it up for discussion. I did go back and listen to the hearing because, and Commissioner Levin was absolutely right. That word zoning was not mentioned in the actual motion, but there was a lot of conversation about being bold, and inherent in that, in my simple brain, is that if you're going to be bold, then you're going to end up having to do something sort of bold in policies and zoning. So I'm fine with the way it went, but in credit to Commissioner Levin, he was absolutely right. And I commend his astute attention to details. Other discussion on the motion before us to approve the minutes. We've never had this much conversation on minutes. I love it. Okay, seeing no hands raised, Shelby, would you please call the roll and signify by saying aye if you're in favor, nay if you're opposed.
Commissioner Augustine?
Aye.
Commissioner Griggs?
Aye.
Commissioner Heller?
Aye.
Commissioner Kopcho?
Aye.
Commissioner Levin?
Nay?
Commissioner Pollock?
Aye.
Commissioner Schweikart?
Aye.
And Commissioner Slater?
Aye.
Commissioner Griggs, I just want to confirm with your comment about not agreeing with the language that you are saying aye to accepting the minutes.
Yes, I am, because
okay.
I think I am.
Okay.
Okay, so moving on to 6, there are no special orders of business, no information reports, no other public comment, nobody signed up. Lisa, it's your planning administrator's report.
Great, thank you. I wanted to start by introducing one of the new planners who attended tonight to listen, Kyle Kearns. Kyle wants to turn on his camera and say hi. I did let you guys know we've hired 2 new planners. Kyle's a planner 2, came to us from Medford, working on current planning. So sooner than later, I'm sure you will see him presenting. And I think he got 2 great examples of different ways planners present information tonight and how cases can go. So hopefully he's not scared of you guys now after that.
We're really nice, Kyle. Welcome.
Thanks Kyle,
Thank
for
you.
attending. I have a few other updates. We've talked about a couple of times reappointments of poor Commissioner Schweikart and Augustine was delayed repeatedly because the city council hadn't got their stuff together, but they were reappointed recently. There was no question, I don't think, that they were going to be reappointed. The council just hadn't got around to it, so congratulations. We do have two commissioners who will be terming out at the end of this year, Commissioner Pollock and Commissioner McKinley. I believe at the end of this year will both be at the end of their second terms. I know Commissioner Pollock is already doing great work to recruit new members from West Salem. The seats are not dedicated to areas of town, but Commissioner Pollock is the only person currently on the commission that lives in West Salem. So maybe we can get another West Salem representative. So thank you, Commissioner Pollock, for doing that. And anybody else on the commission, if you want to start soliciting folks to apply, that would be great. I think we sent out an email that the Our Salem Zoning Committee has been formed. So thank you for Commissioner Griggs, Schweikart, Pollock, and Levin. You have that right? The four commissioners that were appointed, and you should have already received emails from, I think they're coming from Eunice with the dates and times. So we've only scheduled 3. We're hoping we can get through it in 3, but we do have some backup meetings in mind if not. So that should be fun. And for the rest of the commissioners, we will send out a link if you want to watch it. They will be live on YouTube, just like these meetings. So if the rest of you want to weigh in, and it will be open for public comment as well. So if you want to attend and comment at the end as a member of the public. April 20th, our next meeting, we do have an appeal. So we have a public hearing that's going to be an appeal. And then we also will have a housing update. So Eunice will be here with an updated memo of our housing numbers. We brought our last one maybe June of last summer. So we now have the rest of the 2020 data on multifamily apartments. We'll be bringing that. I also wanted to remind folks that the chat function on Zoom is only viewable by Shelby. So it's not viewable by all the commissioners or even by President Griggs. So if you do type something in there, only Shelby can see it. If it's something she can help you with, she will, or if she can try to send it to me, even I can't see it. So just a reminder, it's not a group chat. And then the only other thing I want to talk about, kind of in light of the motion from Commissioner Slater, which I tried to write but got wrong, so I apologize for that, is the kind of the rules or process if we're going to have commissioners make off agenda item motions or motions that aren't related, I should say, to public hearings, right? We basically have a staff recommendation for a public hearing, and I think you guys are, you can either say staff recommendation or, as clearly demonstrated tonight, can do staff recommendation minus this or add this. But when there's items that aren't related to a public hearing, if you want to bring an item forward, I think this is the way to do it. They do it at City Council, which I think works really well. So this is open for debate, but their rule is that the councilors need to provide that item and or motion to staff before the agenda goes out, and then we can put it on the agenda and provide it to all the commissioners so they have a chance to read it, so they're not being asked to vote on something that night that they hadn't seen before. If a counselor, for example, can't provide it ahead of time, they can bring it up at the meeting and talk about it, and then the vote would happen at the next meeting. So it's pretty rare so far that you guys have brought up things that aren't really related to public hearings. But I think a good example was Commissioner Pollock's Marine Drive issue that she brought up. You know, we had a conversation, and then before there was a discussion of or a vote on sending a letter. Instead, we put it on a different agenda item, brought staff to talk about it, etc. So that would be my suggestion if commissioners want to bring forward items that aren't being brought forward by the staff. So hopefully that's agreeable to everyone. I'm happy to answer questions though about that.
Commissioner Pollock has her hand raised.
A couple of things. First of all, I want to get our new, I guess he's off already.
He's going to go eat dinner.
Oh, well, make sure the HOA stuff.
Oh, I was supposed to tell you, Olivia texted me afterwards, and hers is in her report on page 3. It's under the background section. She did a word search. She was like, see, she even said, Lisa told me to put it in there. And I was going to write her and be like, you're getting a bad review. Because I did tell her So hers is on page 3. I see that Bryce missed it, so that's my bad.
And you know,
Okay,
when
then,
Commissioner Pollock is no longer on the planning commission,
okay.
she is going to be listening to me.
I told Olivia I would bring it up at the end, just so she
Okay.
had some vindication that she got it in there. So
On YouTube for the whole world to see for infinity, I apologize to Olivia and I thank her for doing what we really want to have is abide by the code. The
Yeah,
next thing is when you talk about things ahead of time for the commissioners to review, like this commission for that we're on with regarding zoning and climate stuff. I've done a lot of research already, and I'm going through and reading the research. And if I get down to, because there's like 2 EPA reports that are like 95 pages, and a bunch of other ones, white paper and everything. If I get one that's really, really good that I think would benefit, would it be administrative burden if I send that to Eunice and ask her to supply it to all the other commissioners so that they could read it beforehand?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Anything you want to have, any of the commissioners or counselors want to have in the packet, we're happy to send that out.
Okay.
Feel free.
Okay.
And we would like to read it too. Anything that you think is relevant, we're happy to read. So send it our way.
Okay. Great.
Any other
Thank you.
questions for Lisa? And, you know, just for me, I'm fine with that approach about providing the motions in writing ahead of time. Just, I think we're better served with a little bit of time to review everything. So, Commissioner Kopcho.
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, cool. I just, thanks, Lisa and everybody. I feel like we haven't had a meeting in a really long time. So I just wanted to talk about, I don't think it was in your update tonight, but we talked about it in one of the previous months. The updates to the UPC that are coming at some point down the pike, probably as our Salem gets fleshed out and climate action task force and things like that. But in looking at keeping kind of that in mind and looking at the 2 items that we saw tonight and the striking similarity and overlap, at least in so far as setback requirements are concerned and adjustments to setbacks for design, I'd like to see if staff can't look at that as an area to address in these upcoming round of revisions specifically. I know that in the work and being on the climate task force, one of the strategies that we're going to talk tomorrow is a climate task force meeting. So everybody tune into that for 3 hours from 9 a.m. to noon, because you have nothing else going on in the morning on a Wednesday. But one of the strategies that's in there, and there's 221 or something like that, is the reduction of setbacks. And whether or not that gets, you know, all the way through the process or not, but having it on the radar, because I think that it's something that will take place, and being ahead of it rather than just kind of waiting around would be my preference. I like to be ahead of things. So if we could do that, I think that would just be really great.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will say in our urban, zones, we don't have building setbacks generally. So like downtown, South Waterfront, that kind of stuff. An example tonight, it was the parking lot. So we do have landscape setbacks, and the line went right through the parking lot. That was the zoning problem. Generally, also the property lines are a problem for the building code, because otherwise, if at a property line, you're supposed to have a fire rated wall, right? And so, yeah.
I think where utilities are required or safety is an issue is one thing, but if it's there and if that's not,
right,
like side interior setbacks in certain instances and things like that. So
yeah, and I should say we're still hoping to start doing some work sessions on the package of amendments. We were hoping April, it's already April, so maybe early May. I will say we were asked to pivot and start looking at some zoning code amendments for car camping, tent camping, and kind of micro shelters, pallets, that kind of stuff that the zoning code doesn't address today. And so Bryce has put the brakes on the larger amendment he was working on and has spent the last few weeks furiously researching what other cities do, and we're meeting with providers and legal and that kind of stuff. So we're working on that. So that's delayed us a little bit from coming, but we're still working on it. We're still working on the House Bill 2001 amendments. We're getting pretty close with a sign code amendment to bring forward. So hopefully we will keep you all busy this summer with public hearings and work sessions. I also should have mentioned that our Salem policy meetings have started happening. Last week was the first week. They're every Wednesday at noon and 5:30. It's the same topic. You get 2 opportunities, or if you're really excited, you can come to both. So we had diversity, equity, inclusion as the topic last week, and I think it was a great discussion. Lots of people came. We had live polling, and tomorrow's topic is housing. So anybody who wants to attend that, feel free or pass the word. Thank you.
Commissioner Schweikart has a question for you, I believe, Lisa.
Yeah, following up on that pivot that you were asked to do with respect to our homeless population and trying to find ways to house those who are currently homeless. Actually, that was kind of part of the basis of my question about the definition of household living. Because I was wondering about like how that definition could potentially make it more difficult for temporary residential structures, temporary residential living to be permitted. Because I was thinking about the fact that, you know, HUD has a variety of like funding resources that are supposed to create a continuum of care. And one of those is rapid rehousing, which is a temporary sheltering situation, right? And so it's not emergency shelters, it's not permanent housing, it's somewhere in between. And so trying to figure out kind of like, how do we appropriately provide flexibility in our land uses, right? To allow and accommodate for, you know, folks who may be able to pull down that funding resource to try to house this population. That's why I brought it up.
I will say that I get asked, I feel like every week, from somebody that's wanting to do something related to some type of homeless, houseless, you know, situation, if they're allowed in the zone. And I have to ask them so many questions to figure out how we're going to classify it. Like, well, do you have bathrooms? Are you providing care? Are the folks mentally disabled? Do they need this kind of stuff? Because we define things in a pretty old fashioned way. You know, we have a homeless shelter as a use, and we have like a nursing home as a use, and then we have like single family and apartments basically in our zoning code. And it gets very difficult. And there's been a lot of new types of, even our own housing authority, new ventures that they're, you know, I guess through the funding sources. And it's been very difficult for us to classify them and get them easily through the process. And there's a lot of work at the state. I don't know if anyone's following the legislative session, but there's a lot of bills that are kind of preempting or superseding affordable housing, homeless shelters, et cetera. So some of the rules that we have very soon in the next few months may not apply for any of that anyway. So we would just need to change our code to recognize that. But some of these barriers, for example, to homeless shelters, like a lengthy conditional use process, potentially will go away through some of these state laws. So yeah, it's a very changing and dynamic environment right now. And I would definitely agree that our zoning code is not built to address all those different uses.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be great to follow up and see what of that state legislation ends up getting enacted, because you know, when you think about the overlaps between housing and health, and I don't know if this is something that comes up in terms of kind of conversations with the health department, but what I've been seeing just on like the development side of things is that you know, folks that are building for persons with mental illness, persons with developmental disabilities, you know, which there's a high co-occurrence of homelessness and those particular special needs, that congregate care settings are can be a best practice and are widely used. So that's just like another thing, is that like when you're looking at the co-occurrence between those things, that you're going to be seeing people trying to build a congregate care setting. So.
Okay, any other questions or comments for Lisa? We'll move on to the comments for the good of the order. And I wanted to just commend Shelby for the detailed minutes that you provided from the last meeting. You did a remarkable job. I mean, so much detail. So I just wanted that to be on the record.
Thank you.
You're welcome, Shelby. Commissioner Heller.
Oh, I am.
Your hand's raised.
Yeah. I just wanted to thank Lisa for helping me out. She answered a bunch of questions for me that I had about the code, and she's just been a great resource. And I want to thank you, Lisa.
Yay.
Oh, thank you. You're welcome.
Any other accolades we should share? Okay. Any other comments for the good of the order before we adjourn? If not, the meeting's adjourned and we'll see you on the 20th. Take care.
Bye.